Hi, I'm Brighid Doherty of the Solidago School of Herbalism, coming to you from a bridged island on the coast of Maine. And it's January right now. It's cold outside, but it's warm inside the apothecary. And we're going to be talking about nourishing herbal infusions. Nourishing herbal infusions are frugal nutrition for optimum health. You will learn how to build health with common herbs in a daily self-care ritual of nourishing herbal infusions. We're going to talk about how to make them, what herbs to make them with, and the benefits that they offer. And we're going to compare and contrast what a nourishing herbal infusion is compared to a tea, and specific kind of categories of herbs that we're going to work with in the infusions and which ones we will not work with in making nourishing herbal infusions. Essentially, a nourishing herbal infusion is a large amount of nutritive plant material that is dried, steeped for a long time, like 4 to 8 hours or maybe even longer, in boiling hot water. So we're gonna put an ounce of herb into a mason jar. We're gonna weigh it out. And then we're going to fill the jar to the top with boiling water, and we're going to let it sit on the countertop with a tight lid for 4 to 8 hours, and then we're going to strain it out and drink a full quart a day. And I've been doing this, working with nourishing herbal infusions, making them, drinking them, even teaching about them for over 10 years. I first learned about them from Susan Weed, who is a mentor of mine. I am an herbalist in the wise woman tradition, and she has a very specific way of making them, and that's how I was trained, and so that is what this course is going to be based on, is my training. So to introduce myself further, like I said, my name is Brighid Doherty, and I started the Solidago School of Herbalism based here on Deer Isle about 5 years ago. I'm a mother. I have a 7-year-old daughter. I am a community herbalist and educator. I offer online classes and local classes. I offer personal health consultations. And I'm also an author. I wrote the book Drinkable Healing Infusions, 100 Recipes to Soothe Your Ailments and Boost Immunity, last year. And I do talk about the nourishing infusions in here, as well as all other different ways that you can infuse herbs into beverages. And I'm also a podcaster. I have the Healthy Herb podcast, which has been running for about 2 years at this point, and there's over 80 episodes where I dig deep into all different types of herbs, but really the main mission is to inspire and inform people to connect and relate to the common herbs that grow all around you and how to incorporate them into daily life. So in this course, I'm really excited to talk about all the wonderful herbs that there are, and also to actually make the infusions with. So we're going to talk specifically about probably around 10 herbs, and then all the different benefits that they can offer you. We'll talk about if you want to harvest them or purchase them. We're going to demonstrate how to make the infusions, talk about the frugality of them, and also really get into the nitty-gritty so you fully understand, what the difference is between an infusion and a tea, and the different types of herbs that you will use to make infusions versus making teas and even making tinctures. And that will really open the whole world up for you as far as understanding how to prepare herbs in general and looking at them in categories. So I am glad that you are here and interested in incorporating these nourishing herbs into daily life, and I look forward to going along on this journey with you. I'm going to talk about nourishing herbal infusions. What is a nourishing herbal infusion versus what is a tea? How are they different? What is a decoction? So all of the water-based preparations, and how do they differ, and how do we know what type of herbs to use for each one, especially the nourishing infusion? So to start out, just the word infusion itself, I feel, can be confusing because it's very vague and different herbalists use it in different ways. So an infusion is, in my mind, it's basically water that is herbs that are infused into some sort of solvent. Probably most often it's water when we're talking about infusions. Within that realm of infusions, there's 3 main ways that we can infuse herbs into water. One way is by making a tisane or an herbal tea. The other way is a decoction. And the third way is the nourishing herbal infusion. They're all different. We use different types of herbs for each one, and the preparation is slightly different. So for a tea, we use a small amount of plant material, like a teaspoon to a tablespoon, usually of a flower or a leaf of a plant material. And the plants that we use are usually, they smell good, they taste good, they might be a little bitter, but they have flavor and color and scent to them, generally. They can be made with dried plant material, or they could be made with fresh plant material. A decoction is a simmered tea. So we use plant materials that are tough in nature, so seeds, berries, roots, and mushrooms all get simmered for 20 to 40 minutes or longer, depending on how tough the plant material is and how concentrated you want your brew to be. And the decoction is the same amount of herb to water ratio, generally speaking. Of course, there's all kinds of gray areas within this and herbalism in general, but this is just a quick overview. Now, a nourishing herbal infusion differs because a nourishing herbal infusion, we're actually using a large amount of plant material, and it's always dried plant material. It can be leaves, flowers, roots, seeds, berries. It can be all different parts of the plant. Mushrooms, I think, always just need to be decocted, but otherwise it could be any part of the plant, as long as there's not a lot of aroma to that plant. There's not a lot of aromatic oils that offer that. We also aren't going to be using poisonous plants or highly medicinal plants. What we are going to be using is very nourishing plants, hence the name Nourishing Herbal Infusion. So plants that are concentrated in minerals and vitamins and antioxidants, plants that tend to have full spectrum action throughout the body because they are nourishing, and that's mostly where their medicinal constituents and actions come from. They tend to have a lot of protein as well, and they can have some mucilaginous constituents as well that are soothing and moisturizing, moistening, I guess I would say. The nourishing herbal infusion, so this is an example. This is stinging nettle, which we know is a wild food, and it can be, it could be a cooked green. You can make soups with it, highly, highly nutritious. So essentially we are cooking the nettle and turning it into a beverage that we can consume on a regular basis, where we're extracting all the goodness from it, so you don't even have to eat the fiber. We just get all the nutrients that are within it. And when I say a large amount of plant material, people are often a little shocked or taken aback by actually how much plant material we are using. So this is a nettle nourishing herbal infusion. We weigh out 1 ounce of herb. No matter what herb it is for the nourishing infusion, it's always 1 ounce by weight. And we put it in a 1 quart jar and fill the jar to the top with boiling water. And then we let it steep for a really long time, like 4 hours at a minimum, because that's about how long it takes for the minerals to extract into the water. It can also steep for 8 to 10 to 12 hours, or if it's refrigerated and the seal is not broken, it can steep for days, I have found, just as long. But once you break the seal, because there are so many minerals and protein usually in the plant material, then it turns pretty quickly. So within 36 hours, you want to drink that full quart of infusion. Because it's a food, the goal is that we're drinking a quart of nourishing herbal infusion on a daily basis, and we're rotating through the different herbs. And we use one herb at a time for the infusion. Instead of doing a blend of herbs is ideal, because that way you can really, because we're using such a large amount of the plant material, you can really read how your body reacts to that plant, and you build a relationship with that plant and with the infusion, and then you can switch it up day to day, and you can be like, oh, well, today I definitely feel like I need some nettle in my life, or today I feel like I need some oat straw in my life. And so the types of herbs we use, nourishing herbs. We can also use tonic and adaptogen herbs, as long as they don't have a strong scent to them. Herbs that are nourishing, nutritive, modulating in action. So I want to briefly touch on the different categories of herbs in the broad spectrum, so we know which ones we can pick and choose from for the nourishing herbal infusions versus teas. Because if we were to make a tea with the stinging nettle, we're really not going to get the benefits that we're looking for, because we're using such a small amount of plant material and we're steeping it for such a short amount of time that it's not going to be providing any of the nutrition. If anything, with stinging nettle, it might have more of the diuretic action, but without offering all the minerals that help to replace the minerals that are lost in the diuretic action. Categories of herbs. Number one would be nourishing herbs. And those are food-like herbs, like we've been talking about. So examples of that would be, and that's what we'll be talking about in this class, is nettle, chickweed, oat straw, red clover blossom, comfrey leaf, linden blossom, hawthorn, and a variety of others. But along those lines, violet leaf would be another example. So plants that are mild in flavor and highly nutritious. Then within that realm of nourishing, but also moving, that can kind of ebb and flow with other categories of herbs, are tonic and adaptogen herbs. So they're a little bit more of an amorphous category, but tonic herbs really kind of tone different organ systems and can be worked with, in pattern. So you would work with a tonic herb like 1 or 2 days a week, but for multiple weeks in a row, so that it's almost like as if you were exercising your muscles. I feel like the tonic herbs exercise organ systems and keep them healthy and happy. So where hawthorn, I mentioned, is a nourishing herb, but it's also considered to be a heart tonic because it has a normalizing and modulating and strengthening effect on the heart and the cardiovascular system as a whole. Adaptogen herbs, we'll be working with astragalus and schizandra berry in this class as far as nourishing infusions, because they are very nourishing. Adaptogens, the main definition that I relate to adaptogens is that they help the body be more resilient in times of stress. They are normalizing and modulating. So they help the body come more into a healthful state of homeostasis. And they also have non-specific direction of action. So they tend to kind of work on the whole body. It's not like necessarily this adaptogen herb is going to be taken to relieve stomach spasms or something like that. That's not really how they work. They work best if you take them over a long period of time to help to build and support the body. So a lot of them work well as nourishing infusions. However, there's some adaptogens that have aroma to them. Like I immediately think of tulsi or holy basil. And so that would be an adaptogen that we would not make a nourishing infusion with, we would make a tea with. So there is a little gray area within tonic and adaptogens, but many tonics and adaptogens can be worked with as a nourishing infusion. Then there's the stimulating and sedating herbs, which we do not use for nourishing herbal infusions. These tend to be stronger in action. They tend to be used more acutely, and they tend to have a lot of aromatic oils in them because those aromatic oils have a lot of those benefits. They can stimulate or sedate. They can, relax muscles, or they can wake you up. And again, I think the word stimulate is used a lot in herbalism to mean different things. And so when we're talking about stimulating and sedating, what I'm saying is they push you beyond your natural ability. So coffee, classic example of a stimulating herb, pushes you beyond your normal capacity of energy. But in the long run, it's sedating because it depletes you. It depletes your energy reserves because it's pushing you beyond what you have. And so oftentimes there's a crash or a sedative action, it could be considered, with coffee. And that goes with a lot of these stimulating and sedating herbs. And of course, there's a huge range of intensity of stimulating and sedating, coffee being one of the most intense, I would say. Mint could be considered to be stimulating or sedating. It's used to awaken and enliven, but then it can also be used to calm and soothe different parts of the body, not only just the mind. So those herbs tend not to be nourishing infusion herbs. And then the more intense herbs can be the poisonous herbs, the herbs that are really strong in poisonous constituents that we really take in very small amounts for medicine. Examples would be poke root, lobelia, or cayenne. So obviously if an herb that we use in very small doses, we're not going to be making a very strong nourishing infusion with it. Those herbs we tend to make tinctures with because we can control the dose and use very small doses with tinctures that way. So nourishing herbal infusions, let your food be your medicine and your medicine be your food. This is a classic example of that. Nourishment does work. It does build the body, support the body, and it especially is very helpful in chronic health conditions, inflammation states, coming out of debilitating states, dealing with surgery or injury. Anytime that you just need to build the body, build the stores of the body. And they can be really nice adjunct to conventional medicine because they basically are just very healthy food. And they are, in my mind, a tool for life. So once you start working with the nourishing herbal infusions and really start incorporating them into your daily lifestyle, you will soon realize that this is a tool in your medicine bag that you can always rely on. It's also a great way to work with herbs on a daily basis, even if you're not in a diseased state. Let's talk about why nourishing herbal infusions are frugal nutrition. So we can compare them to a bunch of other ways that we get nutrition and realize that they are actually very inexpensive. Now there is a range per infusion of the cost depending on the herb that you're using and where you get it from. But I would say on average the infusion costs about $2 per infusion, $2 a day for the quart of infusion. And that's on the higher end for sure. Somewhere between $1 and $2. And compared to, and so what are you getting for that amount really to begin with? What you're getting from that amount is you're getting a full spectrum of minerals, and not just calcium, but you're getting a variety of forms of calcium and a variety of forms of magnesium and all of the other minerals. And we'll get into the details of what herbs have what minerals when we get into the specific herbs. But in general, there's a full range of, it's basically a multivitamin and mineral complex in each infusion. But it's real multivitamins and minerals. It's real direct from nature, from the plant, and in a form that humans could never create like we create in supplements. And it's inexpensive. It's varied as well. It's not going to be the same in every infusion, and every batch of nettle is always going to be a little different. But humans are varied as well. So I think that if we incorporate varied foods into our lives and varied nutrition, then it works well for us, because that's kind of how we work. It might not be how our brain works. Our brain wants to know every step of the way, right? Like every specific amount that we're getting, but that's not true nutrition in the sense of the word of how our bodies actually get nutrition from the earth naturally. So when we compare that $1 or $2 a day to, say, a multivitamin or mineral supplement, I mean, those can be very expensive, especially the high quality ones, the food-based ones that they say. So I think in that sense, we're definitely, not only are we getting hydration with our infusion, but we're also getting a much better source of vitamins and minerals, and most likely costing less. If you're getting a vitamin or mineral that costs less than $1 or $2 a day, then the quality probably is even worse. And I really believe that most of those vitamins and minerals our body eliminates before we even use it, because it's hard for it to recognize them because it's not in their natural form. Not only that, but if you take a calcium supplement, you might be getting one form of calcium: calcium carbonate, calcium citrate, calcium malate, calcium amino acid chelate. I mean, if you go to a health food store and you look at the calcium section, there's about 20 different types of calcium that you can get. And very likely in these infusions, you're getting a nice range of those different types of calciums, whereas in a supplement, they really can only offer you one type of calcium, or maybe two if it's an exceptional supplement. Compared to food, frugal nutrition of the infusion is, $1 or $2 a day of the infusion compared to buying produce, especially these days. You can't even get a head of broccoli for $2. And there's a lot more nutritional value in the infusion than, say, like one bit of produce that you can get for that same amount. I haven't done the studies, but in my general sense, I'm guessing that that's true. And I didn't really have the time to really figure all of that out, but it just seems to me like, we're getting a lot more from the infusion than we're going to get from produce, and it's costing us less. And it's actually easier to access the nutrition because we don't have to break it out of its fibrous state like we do when we get the produce. This is like kind of pre-broken down and readily available to us. So it's less work for our body as well to get the nutrition from. Not only that, but the herbs that we're using for the nourishing infusions, most of them are wild type species of herbs. So even if they're grown on a farm, stinging nettle is still the same type of stinging nettle, the same species of stinging nettle that you would find in the wild. And these wild plants tend to have a lot more variety of phytonutrients in it than our domesticated plants that we eat. A lot of our domesticated plants they've been domesticated to be waterier and sweeter and larger, but with less concentrated nutrition, and not only nutrition, but also all of the other nutrients that wild plants have to offer, because those add all kinds of strange flavors to the wild plants. Whereas when we domesticated our food, we were going more for taste in general, and size and ease in growing and being able to produce a lot of it than we were in flavor. So by working with wild species of plants, even if they are grown on farms, I believe that we're getting a lot more of a variety of chemistry, wild chemistry, so to speak, that our body thrives on and has coexisted with from the beginning of human time. So also compared to herbal capsules and herbal tinctures, the Nourishing Herbal Infusions is a lot more bang for your buck, so to speak. You know, you can get 16 ounces of nettle for $22 roughly. And if you were to get 16 ounces of nettle in a capsule or a tincture, it's going to cost a whole lot more than that, right? Because a 2-ounce tincture of nettle is probably close to $25. And the amount of nettle that's in that tincture is probably half an ounce of dried, you know, it's like, so half an ounce at $25 of nettle and all that it has to offer versus 16 ounces for less than that. So that's a huge cost savings. And you're going to be getting all the nutrition from the nettle versus in the nettle tincture, you're not getting nutrition from it. The alcohol is not as good of a solvent of minerals and vitamins as water is. Also, compared to capsules, I mean, how much nettle are you really going to fit in a capsule? Not a lot. And then how many capsules are you going to fit in a jar? And again, you're paying for all of that processing that happens. So definitely as far as food goes, this is a lot more frugal. And as far as supplement and herbal medicine goes, this is also the cheapest way to go because you're buying your herbs in bulk, you're using them in whole, you're cutting out one of the middlemen, the processing plants. And if you buy them direct from a distributor, then you're also cutting out the stores, but you don't have to pay that price as well. They are also, if you want to compare them to smoothies, a lot of people have their daily smoothie. But if you think of all of the food that goes into a smoothie, it's pretty high-end stuff. You have your yogurt, you have your frozen berries, you have your kale. Usually it's organic. If you're in smoothie mode, you're going organic with all that stuff. And so I don't know, but it would be interesting to find out how much a quart of smoothie costs compared to a $2 at most quart of infusion. Plus it takes less time to make. And then compared to other drinks, coffee, you get a small coffee for $2.50. Soda, I don't even know, but we can't even compare because soda is going to be hazardous to your health, where infusions are only beneficial to your health. Bottled water, tap water, it's going to be cheaper, but at the same time, you're adding so much nutrition to the tap water by adding the herbs. I think that is worth it. So compared to all those things, Nourishing Herbal Infusions is the cheapest way to get nutrition compared to all of those. Now, if you wanted to even have it cost less money, you could go and harvest your herbs yourself. A lot of the herbs we're going to be talking about in this class, stinging nettle, red clover, linden flowers are all plants that grow readily in the wild that you could harvest. Comfrey leaf, you can easily grow it and have multiple harvests in a season. Same with oat straw. It's actually the straw of the plant. It's what people feed their rabbits. Gosh darn it. I wouldn't buy bales of oat straw and make your infusion with that because there might be dead mice and fungus in those. Definitely get food grade oat straw, but along those lines, I mean, these are really inexpensive plants that can be grown in mass amounts to really cut the cost if you are buying them. But you could also grow them inexpensively if you have the time. But then it's like time versus money, and honestly, it's gonna cost you less to buy the herb in bulk than it does to take the time to harvest them and dry them yourself. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's just something to consider because we are using such large amounts of plant material. Minimal supplies. You need 2 mason jars, you need a straining apparatus, and a less than $10 kitchen scale. Super, super easy, super simple. The water is free. If you don't like your water, if you have city water that's chlorinated. You can, when you boil it, you boil off the chlorine because it's a gas and it vaporizes out of it. So minimal supplies. And then you can actually choose inexpensive herbs too. There's going to be some herbs that are infusion herbs that are going to be more money than others. Like chickweed infusion herb, which we'll talk about, I just recently bought it for $15 for a pound. So that's less than $1 per ounce. And violet leaf, you probably would maybe pay $30 a pound for. So you can pick and choose your infusion herbs. You can go with the lesser expensive ones if you want. And they're just fine too. So all of that being said, the other thing that you can do is if you are purchasing your herbs, you can purchase them from bulk distributors. And there are some bulk distributors that are co-ops where you can become a member of the co-op and get a reduced price on your herbs. Or you can buy in bulk and get a discount on the herbs. You could get together with some friends and buy a whole large amount together and then all get discounted amounts. Or you could maybe talk to your local co-op and work out a trade where you can, order herbs and trade hours for volunteer work, depending on what type of food co-op you have in your area, so that you can get creative and see different ways that you can work out getting the bulk herbs. So lots of ways for nourishing herbal infusions to be frugal nutrition, and maybe the most frugal nutrition out there. Let's make a nourishing herbal infusion. It's a very simple process and we just need a few small items. A scale is the most important thing, a scale that weighs out in ounces. And then a canning jar. 2 canning jars are actually helpful so that you have one to make the infusion in and then one to strain the finished infusion into. I like to use, this is not necessary, but I do like to use a funnel for getting the herb material more easily into the jar without making a big mess. And then I like for straining to use a ceramic coffee drip filter and then a straining cloth. And this is basically, I just cut squares out of a flour sack towel that is unbleached, and you can buy like a whole bunch of them and then you can wash them and reuse the squares. They might get a little stained from all the tannins and different colors in the herbs, but they make great straining cloths even for tinctures and infused oils and whatnot. The oil cloths don't really recycle well because it's hard to get the oil back out of the cloth, but for infusions it's nice to have a handful of them, and then you can rinse them out and you can even reuse them after rinsing them, or you can just put them through the laundry. So those are the instruments that we need, and I'm going to put some water on to boil. And then, so today we're going to make a oat straw infusion as a demo. And the first step is to weigh out your herb, which is always important. But actually first I want to just briefly touch on just a reminder as to an easy way to determine which herbs you're going to work with for tea and which herbs you're going to work with for nourishing herbal infusions. So nourishing herbal infusion herb is always a food-like herb that's rich in nutrients, sometimes has protein, but never has a strong smell and is not like a super strong medicinal action. It does have vast medicinal qualities, but it's not like a really antimicrobial or stimulant sedative type of herb. So a great example for me is rosemary versus, say, nettle or oat straw. Rosemary, when we're cooking food, because the nourishing infusion herbs are always food-like herbs because we're using food-like quantities and we're going for food-like benefits. The rosemary is very strongly scented. Just touching that plant now, all I can smell is rosemary, which is wonderful. And if you were cooking with rosemary, in a soup or in a batch of potatoes or something, you'd really just use maybe a tablespoon at the most, a very small amount of the plant, and you still get drastic effects flavor-wise and all that. And same with the tea, use a small amount of the aromatic herbs. And with the rosemary, when you're cooking, if it's fresh rosemary especially, you're going to put it in at the end of your soup cooking process so that you retain a lot of those volatile oils in the soup and the flavor, so it's fresh and bright. And same with the tea, it's got a short steeping time. Highly scented herbs, short steeping time, strong medicinal action. Rosemary is very antimicrobial, very mind and mood stimulating. And so then with the nourishing herbs, you're going to think of stinging nettle is more like kale or spinach, where you're using large amounts of the plant material. And even when you think you're using large amounts, it cooks down to almost nothing. So you have to keep adding more if you really want to use a lot of the plant to get the most nutrition from it. Not only that, but instead of steeping it for a short amount of time to get the volatile oils, what we're really going for is the minerals and vitamins in that cellular structure, in that cellular matrix within the plant. And so we have to cook the kale for a really long time, ideally 45 minutes, an hour, to really break it down so that we can access the minerals from it. And that's what we're doing with our nourishing herbs. We're steeping them for a long amount of time, like 4 hours at a minimum, because in really hot water, because that's how long it takes to really extract the minerals, which is really what we're going for. Minerals are so important in all functions of our body, not only our physical structure, but also in just how the body functions, how the muscles function, how just everything flows better with ample minerals to work with. I remember taking anatomy physiology class for herbalists, and so much information, it's hard to really grasp it all. It's not like I went to med school, but one thing I really did grasp is that so many functions in the body need calcium and magnesium and potassium, and if we don't have them, then things just don't work optimally. That being said, we're going to work with oat straw today to make a nourishing herbal infusion. So I like to buy my herbs in bulk, and I buy them by the pound. It's more cost effective that way, and I tend to just leave them in the bag instead of putting them in a bigger jar. That's pretty, and if you want to have them out on your counter so that you can more easily see them, especially when you get started with making your infusions, that's really helpful. Looks like my water's boiling. But for me, I just leave them in the bag and put them in a cabinet, and then they take up less space the more that you use them. You can kind of roll them down, so you have less space taken up by bulk amounts of herb. So the first step in making an infusion is to weigh out 1 ounce of your herb. Now this is really important. So one thing that we want to take note of is we're always just using 1 herb at a time to make our nourishing herbal infusions. Because we're using such a large amount, it's just helpful. That way we know we're getting the full benefit of the herb by using the full ounce. And then we also, by working with herbs as simples, we really get to know how that herb relates to our body. We really start to build a relationship with that herb, and that can be really beneficial. And then we can be like, oh, like today feels like an oat straw kind of day, or oh, I'd really feel like I need a little pep in my life, time to have some nettle. Or you can just rotate through, pick 5 herbs from this class series that really call out to you, and rotate through them. One day you do 1 herb, the next day you do another herb, and that way you don't get bored. If you were to put them all in a formula, it would take 5 days to get enough of 1 herb. Say if you did 1/5 of an ounce of each herb, and then you don't really relate to it on a one-on-one. I find the more that I work with herbs as simples, the more that's just what I crave and what I want. And I was making I saw someone make a blend of It was just 2 herbs. I think it was astragalus and schizandra, which we talk in this class about both of those herbs. And I was like, oh, that kind of sounds like a nice combo. And I put them in the combo and tried it out after having been working with them as simples for so long in my life. And I was just like, oh, I just feel like I don't know. I just really wanted to just taste the astragalus and just taste the schizandra and just relate with them that way. So I challenge you to try working with herbs as simples and just see how it works for you. I feel like the herbs are so complex unto themselves that they don't necessarily need to be in formula. You can work with different herbs in one day if you want to, work with energetics, and maybe one's too drying for you, one's too moistening. But often I find, especially with the nourishing herbs, they tend to be pretty neutral in energetics, and they tend to be pretty neutral in which way they're going to move the body. The body can kind of pick and choose how they want to work with it. Okay, so the herb is in the jar. This is about 1 ounce of oat straw. The lighter, fluffier herbs, the linden, the red clover, the flowers are going to have a lot more air space, so they're going to look like they're taking up a lot more space in your jar. The denser herbs like astragalus root, schizandra berry are going to be a lot less volume. So that's why we always want to weigh out 1 ounce, because the volume is always going to change, even from the bag of oat straw. The top of the bag is all the light, fluffy oat straw. It's going to be larger volume to get that ounce weight. The bottom of the oat straw bag is going to be all the crumbs and crumbles and everything that's kind of sunk down to the bottom of the bag. So it's going to be less volume to get that ounce. So even within one bag of herb, to get the same amount of weight, the volume is going to look different. So that's why we always use a weight measurement. Also, it looks like a lot of herb. So oftentimes people think that they're using a full ounce, or put in a handful and it's going to be a large enough amount, but oftentimes it's still not enough. So really, to get the full benefit of the herb, we want to use a full ounce. Okay, and then we add the boiling hot water. And mason jars, you just want to make sure they're not super cold when you add the boiling hot water to it, because they can crack. Or if you're afraid of that, you can just do it in a sink or over something that would catch the boiling hot water in case your jar does crack. But it rarely happens. For me, it just happens if my jar is fresh out of being stored in a really cold room and I put the hot water directly in it. Okay, you want to fill it up as much as you can with the hot water, and then this is a very important step, is you want to stir in the herb. And you'll see that you can often get, especially with the fluffier herbs, you can add more hot water after you stir it in, because you really want to fill your jar right up to the tippy top with the hot water. That way that you're ensuring that you get the most infusion and you don't have the air space, so it really allows for a nice suction and seal, a vacuum seal, and a really nice way to steam and cook the herbs, because that's essentially what we're doing, is we are rehydrating and then cooking our herb to get the nutrition out of it. Okay, and then you put the tight lid on, and then you just let it sit on your countertop for, let's say, a minimum of 4 hours. You could do it overnight, 8 hours. After 8 hours, you either want to strain it or put it in a refrigerator, because a lot of these nourishing herbs also are loaded with amino acids. They have a lot of protein in them, and that, combined with the minerals, makes them ferment or rot pretty quickly. So within 36 hours, and ideally 24 hours of straining your infusion, you want to drink it. And keep it cold unless you are in the process of drinking it, ideally. Granted, some days, I'm a landscape gardener in the summertime. Sometimes I'll when I'm doing my winter work on the go, I will take my infusion jar, I'll strain the infusion into a jar, and then I'll just take that with me throughout the day and sip on it. And that seems to be fine. It's not like it has to be in the refrigerator the whole time. But generally, you don't want it cooking out in the hot sun for hours on end because, all those like fun microbes in the air that get into it when you strain it like to have a party in there too, because they know how good it is for you as well. Okay, so this is really hot, so I'm just gonna move it over here. So once you have let your infusion sit for 48 hours, this is Oat Straw infusion that I made last night, you're going to strain it out. So you need an empty mason jar and the coffee drip filter. I just find they sit on top of jars really nicely and they're nice and stable, and it really filters the infusion quite well versus a mesh strainer, although some people will use like a metal mesh strainer. And then you just want to make sure that your fabric, I really like to use the fabric because it allows to really squeeze the plant material easily. You want to make sure it drapes on all sides of your strainer, otherwise it could make a mess if it's not fully draped over. Okay. So, and then you simply just pour it through. Some of the infusion herbs have more mucilage than others, so they are slower draining, but the oat straw is actually one of the easiest ones to pour through the strainer. And then you want to get it all the plant material out of the jar. And into the straining cloth. So there's still a lot of infusion in this plant material, right? Because we rehydrated it. And we want to make sure that we squeeze all of that out because that has all the goods in it. Okay, and then I just like to squeeze and twist and squeeze some more. And then with your leftover plant material, it's really important to not just throw it in the trash due to respect to the plants, and actually it makes great compost material if you have a compost pile. I feed it to my chickens and they love it. So that's a great way to do it. Also, you might not have chickens or a compost pile. You might not have that option. But if you have an outdoor area that you could spread it on, or maybe under some shrubbery outside your house or your apartment building, or around some trees, if you can just put it in a little baggie with you and kind of spread it back onto the earth in one way or another. And then also on that same note, if you have infusion that has gone bad, so you didn't get a time to drink it all, the best thing to do with it is to feed it to your houseplants. And if it doesn't smell too bad, another option is you can use it as a hair rinse in the shower. But sometimes they can smell pretty stinky. And that's a great way to know if an infusion has turned, if it's gone bad, is just by the smell of it. The nose knows, as they say. So if it smells good, great. If it doesn't smell good, then feed it to your houseplants and they will thank you for it. So let's see, what else is important to touch on? How to fit it into your schedule. So a classic way to work with these infusions is before you go to bed or after you're cooking your dinner or cleaning up after dinner, put the kettle on to boil and make your infusion, and then just leave it on your counter till the morning. Strain it out in the morning and you have your infusion for the day. That's probably the easiest way. Another way, and what I tend to do, because I like to have a nice cold infusion, especially in the summertime, to take with me, so I like to have it in the fridge before I take it with me. So I will make my infusion in the morning while I'm making my coffee. I'm already boiling water. I have my coffee going. I make my infusion, and then I let it sit on the counter throughout the day. And then when I get home, I put it in the fridge. And then in the following morning, I will strain out the infusion that I made the previous morning and then also make the infusion for the next day. So basically, I'm making my coffee, I'm making my infusion, and I'm straining the infusion that I'm going to drink for that day. So that seems to be what works well for me, especially in the summer when I want a nice cold brew. And then another way, if you have a really busy life and Sunday is your day to do your meal prep and all of that, you could actually make 5 infusions on Sunday. Boil a whole bunch of water, have all your jars lined up, fill them all up, and then let them sit for 4 hours or until they're room temperature, and then put them in the fridge before straining them. And then every day you just take out 1 infusion and you strain it. And you want to start with the infusions that are the most protein rich and then work to the least protein rich, because then those ones are going to last longer. So if you're doing the main 5 herbs that Susan Weed kind of developed for the Nourishing Infusions, which are stinging nettle, oat straw, red clover, comfrey, and linden, the order in which they are the most protein to the least protein, from my experience, is number 1 is oat straw. That's going to turn the first. And then, either stinging nettle or red clover. And then comfrey. And then linden can be the last because that has the least amount of protein in it. And then, I just suggest that it becomes a daily habit, ritual of self-care. Like, instead of taking your multivitamin or taking a handful of supplements all day, just all you have to do is your Nourishing Herbal Infusion. It can be as simple as cooking a healthy meal, even more simple than cooking a healthy meal or having some sort of lunch to bring with you through the day. Tips on how to ingest them if you don't like the flavor, or different ways to work them into your diet. I really like especially the dark green infusions over ice. Nice ice cold or fresh out of the fridge. It really kind of cuts that green flavor. So that's how I like them. You can also re-warm your infusions. Nothing's going to hurt the infusion. You can freeze it if you want in ice cube trays, or you can reheat it and add honey to it. The red clover, the linden, the oat straw all might be nice with a little bit of honey if you like things a little on the sweeter side. And then the greener infusions like the chickweed, the nettle, the comfrey, those might be better if you go more savory with them. So a little bit of, especially the nettle, like a little bit of miso or a touch of tamari, so it's more soup brothy. You can also just add them to soup, the infusions. You can add hot chocolate, especially to comfrey, is very good. You can mix them with juice or cider to sweeten them up and, change the flavor a little bit. Even when you're making the infusion, if you want, you can just add a little tiny pinch of mint to your herbs. And that can sometimes be the flavor changer that's just enough if the green herbs are a little too much for you and if you like mint. Just a pinch, though. You don't want to do too much. And then I like to add them to smoothies too, especially the linden and astragalus and oat straw are really nice as a smoothie base. You can, if you have a really hard time like getting them in, if the flavor just really bothers you. I personally love the flavor of the herbs, but if you don't really like the green flavor, especially of nettle, or if it's too much and maybe makes you a little nauseous at first because there's so much chlorophyll in it, you can put it in ice cube trays and then add 2 or 3 ice cubes to some water if you wanted, and then that way that it'll be preserved because it's frozen, and then you can just have small amounts every day and then up your amount daily so that you can get your body used to that green flavor. And in no time, I really think that you will be craving the full strength of the of the nettle infusion. That green, once your body gets to relate to these herbs and feel the herbs and feel the nutrients and the minerals, then it will know that it's what it craves. It'll start craving it. And you might even notice that your whole taste buds shift. You will be craving more healthy food versus other food, versus fried food or food that, usually when we have these food cravings, it's our body saying, I need minerals, I need energy, I need goodness. And when you start providing it with you, then your body's like, oh yeah, I want more of that goodness and minerals, not the other thing that I thought I was craving. And they can just become a real tool for you to have, a lifelong tool that you have in your back pocket anytime, ideally it's a daily ritual through life. But if you don't do them daily or you ebb and flow with it, which sometimes I do, it's easy sometimes to get out of the habit, and then I have to get myself back into the habit of making the infusions. But especially if I know that I'm feeling depleted or tired, or if I'm in transition, or if I have a lot of stress in my life, or I'm dealing with some sort of chronic inflammation or injury, or preparing for if I had to go surgery, or dealing with other therapies like cancer therapy, I would make sure that I was definitely getting my nourishing herbal infusions on a daily basis. So I hope that this was demonstrated to you how easy and simple it is, that you know what type of herb you're looking for to make your infusion with, and to give you some ideas of how to work them into your own schedule so that it can become your go-to daily act of self-care. Cheers. Okay, let's talk about oat straw. Oat straw makes a really delicious, nourishing herbal infusion. I buy it by the bulk, of course. And this is what about an ounce of oat straw looks like. It's about up to here on the jar. But again, you want to weigh it out every time because it's going to vary from batch to batch, and even vary from the top of the bag to the bottom of the bag if you buy a pound of it, because it kind of gets smaller and denser at the bottom of the bag. And as I talk about it, I'm going to strain it just so you can see what it looks like. But this is oat straw infusion, and it's cold now. And oat straw has so much to offer us. I could talk about each herb for over an hour. So just know that this is a general overview and that you can dive deeper. I talk a lot about these herbs also at the Healthy Herb podcast. You can try to find an episode on one of these herbs. I have a lot of episodes on a lot of the infusion herbs because I love them so much. So in general though, what I think about oat straw, the number one thing I think about oat straw is it's especially really beneficial for the nervous system. For someone who has frayed, frazzled nerves, if you just feel like you need to chill out, calm down, if you have too much stress in your life, if you just want to, then I feel like oat straw is a great one to incorporate on a regular basis. The oat straw can come in where it has like milky green tops that are kind of cut in with the oat straw, but we're not getting only the tops, the milky green. You can get like bulk milky stage green tops only, but what we want for the nourishing infusions is the oat straw itself, because that's where a lot of the minerals are. So it's essentially the stem and the seed head, in between, before it goes to seed, but after it's in the milky stage. Now we think of milky oats like as a tincture as being really sedating, as like almost a sedative herb, in that category, a stimulant sedative for the nervous system. But the oat straw itself is just super nourishing. It also is really well known for building bone health. So if you are at a stage of osteopenia or even osteoporosis. It really has been shown to help build back bones, even though, modern medicine says that that's impossible. But I've heard many cases of it really having that effect, especially as in this quantity as a nourishing herbal infusion. Now, oat straw, a lot of the way people make it is they will make a decoction of it to really simmer out and get a lot of the minerals out of it. So if you wanted, you could simmer it a little bit first before you steep it. But I find that this makes a really nice infusion too, just as is. What else do I have to say about oat straw? It's also beneficial for the heart, the cardiovascular system. It also really enhances libido. If you've ever heard the term sowing your oats or feeling your oats. So it can really enhance libido function, and along with that really help with hormonal modulation. It doesn't necessarily have hormones in it, but it has precursors to hormones that our body can then take and make hormones with. And it's just, I find it to be a very, very tasty infusion as well. It tastes a little sweet, a little milky, a little bit like oatmeal. Now this infusion, not only is it really beneficial to drink, but it's also really beneficial to apply topically because it's so good for the skin, especially really inflamed skin, dry skin, rashy skin, anything like that. You can drink it ice cold, is delicious. You can drink it warmed up with a little bit of honey if you like that. Or just room temperature. It really isn't bad at room temperature either. Oat straw, if you want to grow it, you can just get some oat seed and broadcast it like you would grow other grasses. And it makes a nice cover crop. If you are rotating, if you have a garden and you're rotating out, letting kind of one bed go fallow for a year to restore its integrity, you can just use oat straw as a cover crop for it and harvest some for your infusion. Or you can buy it, and it is a very inexpensive oat straw. So I hope you get some and try it out. Cheers to oats. Yum. Stinging nettle is a great herb, a perfect herb for nourishing herbal infusions. And I think it's the best way to ingest stinging nettle. You really get all of the benefits, I think, or most of the benefits anyway, from drinking the nourishing herbal infusion of the leaf of stinging nettle. So stinging nettle, Urtica dioica, is the species that is most often worked with in North American herbal medicine. There's also Urtica urens, which is more of an annual nettle that is found more across the pond in Europe and the UK. So, but the Urtica dioica, Urtica, the genus name means to burn, which is that stinging sensation that you get when you touch a living nettle plant or you brush against a living nettle plant. Dioica means two houses, which refers to the fact that it's a dioecious plant, so it has different plants have either male or female flowers on it. There is a powerhouse of nutrients. There's vitamins, there's the carotene, an array of carotenes, which is, our body can turn into vitamin A. There's a whole range of B vitamins, vitamin C complex, vitamin D even, and vitamin K. Then a large array of minerals. We have some of the really common larger minerals that are important that we have in large amounts in our diet, like calcium, magnesium, iron, potassium. And then we have some of those minerals that we can have in smaller amounts but are still very important, like selenium, zinc, chromium, boron, cobalt, phosphorus, copper, manganese, selenium, silicon, tin, and sodium is the list that I've come up with, that I've found that nettle has. So just a full range, and and then it's 10% protein, so it has so much to offer. And then there's probably a huge amount of other phytonutrients that maybe we know about as humans and maybe we don't even know. I think when we think about what's in a plant for chemistry wise, and it's so vast. Like, I don't even think humans can fully comprehend or understand the complexity that just even one plant has to offer us. And that is one reason why I love working with plants as simples, is because they are so complex just unto themselves. They have so much to offer us, such a range of complexity. And then you can really even, within how and when you harvest it, or what species or where you harvest it from, there's just so much variation as well, which is really fun to work with. Back to stinging nettle, however. The Nourishing Herbal Infusion of nettle, so we're going to weigh out 1 ounce of the leaf, which is quite a lot. This is what I weighed out this time around for 1 ounce. It's about up to here. And so we would just fill this with boiling water, give it a stir, put a tight lid on, and then top it off with boiling water again. So you make sure that the jar is as full as you can get with water. And then you put a tight lid on it and let it steep for a minimum of 4 hours. And then you can let it steep longer if you want, as long as you refrigerate it once it comes to room temperature. If you don't break the seal, it can stay in the fridge for multiple days. And then once you do break the seal, you really want to drink that whole quart within 24, definitely within 48 hours. And keeping it refrigerated while you're not drinking it. It can be reheated if you want. That's not going to harm it in any way. Some people like to drink warm beverages. If you do heat it, I would maybe suggest putting a little bit of miso paste in it, or even a little miso powder, or a little tamari, something that's going to give it a little savory, salty note to it. I don't think that honey or something sweet would necessarily go well with nettle, because that's it would be like putting sugar with your spinach or with your kale. It doesn't really, those flavor combos don't work. So we want to go savory. I personally really like nettle iced. I think it tastes delicious and it's very chuggable, either when it's fresh out of the fridge or if it's in a cup with some ice. And sometimes the ice is nice because it can dilute it a little bit, the flavor, as the ice melts, because nettle, of all the nourishing infusions, I think a lot of people absolutely love it, especially if their body really needs it. Some people, it's just a hard flavor to first get used to. It's very green. If you're not used to a lot of chlorophyll in your food, then that can also affect it. So for some people, if you aren't used to eating a lot of green food or green vegetables or plants, then sometimes it can maybe give your stomach, make it feel a little queasy at first if you're not used to having all that chlorophyll, because this is a super green food for sure. Very rich in chlorophyll, and we've definitely concentrated it and extracted it. So I made a nourishing infusion last night, and it's been sitting for well over 8 hours at this point, and we're just going to strain it out so you can see how beautiful and dark and rich the color is of this nettle. And while I do that, I'll talk some more about the benefits that it has to offer. So this is one herb that I think is a favorite of a lot of herbalists, and because it covers so much as far as the different parts of the body's health. Let's see if we can get a good sound on that seal. There we go. So I love that these mason jars work so well because they can really seal the infusion, when you pour boiling hot water into the jar and then cover it with a tight lid and let it cool, it will definitely vacuum seal, which helps preserve the infusion for a few more days. And it also just helps to cook the infusion while it's in the jar. So nettle is just like, it's full body benefit because it's so nutrient rich, but specifically the immune system, it's really beneficial for, especially for autoimmune conditions or allergies. I have a friend who, I've always had cats, and I have a good friend who would come over to my house, and she'd only be able to sit on certain chairs. I mean, maybe I need to be a better house cleaner too, but she had a cat allergy, and she'd always be leaving my house with runny eyes and, itchy, watery eyes just from being in a house where there's a cat. Well, she got onto the Nourishing Infusions and loves nettle, and now she has a cat, and she doesn't have any cat allergies, and she lives with a cat and, loves the cat and cuddles with the cat all the time. And, I was like, remember, like, you used to not even be able to hang out in my house for very long because I had a cat. And she's like, oh. I was like, I think it might be the nettle. I don't know. So I really do think it is the nettle. And so it might take a couple months, of consuming the nettle. Also, if you have seasonal allergies, then drinking nettle, starting, give yourself a solid 6 months. If you get spring allergies, drink the nettle once or twice a week, the nettle Nourishing Herbal Infusion, and then you can, hopefully in the spring or whenever your seasonal allergies are, you will notice a major depletion in the symptoms. So that's a lot of nettle leaf, right? Now that it's rehydrated. That is a lot of leaf. And it's cut and sifted. So if you were harvesting your own nettle, it's really hard to get it. I mean, I guess you could put it in a food processor to get it cut really small. But a lot of times if you're using your own nettle that you've dried, you're going to be like filling the jar basically, like with the full, whole leaves. So that's why it's important to weigh it every time, because every batch is going to look a little different. But if you know that you always have 1 ounce by weight, then you know that you're being consistent. Look at how dark this nettle is. If you have nettle tea, if you make a tea of nettle, it's just going to be like a very dull amber color. And so it's just really obvious that you're just getting so much more, just so much more of everything. Okay, so not only is nettle beneficial for the immune system, it's also really beneficial for the respiratory system. So if you have, asthma or are tied in with the allergies again, or if you're recovering from some sort of lung infection, the nettle just can really help the lungs, helps the integrity of the lungs and makes them more flexible so you can take deeper breaths. Also, classic herb for improving the hair, skin, and nails. So it makes your hair shiny and helps it grow long, makes your nails really strong without any ridges. If you have really weak nails or nails that have really deep ridges in them or nails that peel really easily, it's really a sign that you need more minerals in your life. And same with like hair that's unhealthy, unless it's from chronically treating it with hair dyes and whatnot. But anything in skin, if there's like really dry skin or eczema, really kind of rashy skin that with no known cause or understanding, like these are all things that nettle can be really beneficial for. But as I was saying with the nails can be a really nice marker for the amount of minerals that you have. So if your nails are really weak, it's a sign, that's the last place your body is going to put the minerals. So it's a sign that you just don't have enough. And so these really mineral-rich, nourishing infusions just can really, really help strengthen all aspects of your body and right down to your fingernails as well. Glandular support, full support of hormone health, skeletal support with all that calcium, magnesium, boron, chromium, like really helps to build the integrity of bones and bone density, especially if you're recovering from an injury, can be really beneficial. Nettle's also classic urinary tonic, so if you have chronic UTIs or if you just want to strengthen the integrity of your bladder, urinary tract, and the health of your kidneys, nettle is the number one. If you have any sort of kidney disease or issue, I would go right to nettle personally. Cardiovascular health, just general support of the whole cardiovascular system and the integrity of the veins. So especially if there are varicose veins or kind of weak veins, it can just really help with the strength and flexibility of veins. Liver health, really beneficial there. Digestive support, brain support, brain health, mental function, overall enhancing energy function and chi, vitality of life, which is really noticeable, especially with the Nourishing Infusion. Support of the nervous system, so if you feel like you get a lot of anxiety or stress or edginess, then it can be really beneficial for that. Enhancing fertility. And then also there's a lot of science behind it right now for helping to balance blood sugar levels. So that's something to work with as well if you are pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetes. I'm guessing that you are already keeping good track of your blood sugar levels. And so if you're going to be drinking a lot of nettle infusion, then you just might, I'm sure you're already keeping track of that, but you might need to take less medication. So just keep a close eye on that. And then if you want to grow, harvest, and dry your own nettle, it's pretty easy to do. It's definitely a very weedy plant. You want to be careful where you put it because it can take over with rhizomes that grow underground, kind of like a mint would grow. So just careful where you put it. It's going to like really nutrient rich and kind of damp soil, like it would naturally be found maybe on a stream, on the edge of a stream bank or something. Harvest it. A lot of people like to use gloves while harvesting so you don't get stung and cover your arms. And because it's so protein rich, when you hang it to dry, you just want to hang a few stems together at a time. You don't want to put a big bunch together. Or if you're going to spread it out on a screen or something, just lay it out. Be careful not to bruise it. And you don't want the plants really touching each other a lot because they will rot or mildew. So ample drying space. And then you can cut it up, the stem, the leaves, all of that, and work with it for the Nourishing Infusions. You generally don't want to harvest nettle to dry when it starts to go to flower. So before that it's okay, but once it starts flowering, there are some constituents in it that can actually be more challenging for the kidneys. According to many people say that. So just, maybe when it's thigh high, the nettle, because it can grow to be quite tall. But before it starts looking like it's going to bloom at any point, but it's still really leafy, then that's when you would want to harvest it and hang it to dry. So I hope that you practice working with nettle, get to know nettle, and you can learn more about it on my Healthy Herb podcast episode number 15, where I think it's about an hour-long episode where I really dive even deeper into stinging nettle. Linden blossom is probably one of my favorite infusions, definitely a go-to, definitely a favorite of my 7-year-old daughter as well. And so what we are working with when we're working with linden, we're working with the whole blossoms, ideally, if you can get them. I find the whole blossoms from Frontier Co-op. If you can only find cut and sifted, you can work with that as well. I just prefer the the flavor and texture of the whole blossoms. But you have, so you have this is like the flower itself. And then it also comes with what looks like our leaves, but are actually the samara. If you think of, which is part of the flower, it's attached to the flower. And they're pale yellow, and the leaves of the linden tree are dark green and kind of heart-shaped. So this is the whole blossom is the flower and the samara. I think of the samara as like, the helicopter seeds that come from maple trees that have the wings on it that help to spread the seeds further away from the base of the tree. Well, that's what that essentially is. And so the linden blossom, Tilia is the genus of linden, also known as American basswood, or in Europe it's the lime tree. And so there's about 30 different species around the world of linden, and they can all be used interchangeably. All parts of the plant are safe and medicinal, edible, but it's really the blossom that we're working with. If there are leaves in there, that's not a big problem at all. I find the leaves tend to have more tannins in them. If I harvest them myself, it's just a lot easier to harvest some of the leaf and flower together. And I've made infusions with that, and that's fine. No worries, but it's also, because it can be kind of meticulous just harvesting the flower, the blossom. And the window as to when you can harvest the blossom is pretty short. Here in Maine, it's usually around July 4th, and depending on the weather, if it rains, then the blossoms have a limited lifespan for sure. So it's usually just 1 or 2 weeks anyway that they're in bloom. So keep your eye on your linden trees, and definitely if you can, and if you can reach the blossoms is the other issue. Although a lot of linden trees have some nice low branches, or there are some cultivars of linden that just generally grow smaller. They're often planted in cities, on city sidewalks, and in parking lots of malls because they are such a beautiful tree. So you could also plant one in your yard if you felt so inclined. Definitely protect it from the deer. I've planted some, and the deer have eaten them, so they never really took off. As far as the infusion herbs go, the linden blossom is not loaded with minerals or vitamins, and doesn't really contain a lot of protein either. So this is one plant, if you were going to make all of your infusions, like say it for the week on Sunday, and keep them in your fridge strain one each day, linden could be one of the last ones that you do, because it will last longer than the ones that are more protein and mineral rich. So why are we working and drinking linden in our infusions? And really it's because it is a really wonderful anti-inflammatory or inflammation modulating herb. Plus it has a lot of other benefits as well. So we'll get into that. But first I'm going to start straining this infusion that I made last night of the linden. So with the linden, especially if you are using cut and sifted, but cut and sifted or whole leaf, we only use 1/2 ounce of the linden instead of a full ounce. I will use a full ounce if I am sick, or if I have a really sore throat, or if I'm really going for the medicinal benefits for some acute reason. But for general health and just as a daily infusion, just a 1/2 ounce is fine instead of a full ounce. So, and this is what a 1/2 ounce looks like. It's so light and fluffy, and it takes up a lot of space. So if it was a full ounce, it would probably be the whole jar, right? So a 1/2 ounce is fine. This is the weighed 1/2 ounce. And because linden has a lot of these mucilaginous polysaccharides, which makes polysaccharides as many chained sugar, right? Saccharide being sugar. And mucilaginous, well, slimy, right? And that is a wonderful property that a lot of herbs have. It makes, or constituent, gives them the property of being really, or the action of being very demulcent, internally very soothing to mucous membranes, and emollient externally to the skin. Very, very soothing, very anti-inflammatory, and very cooling for if you have like really red or inflamed skin, or even any sort of mucous membrane tissues internally. So anytime I think of herbs that are really have these mucilaginous polysaccharides, you can really think of all mucous membranes in the body are going to be supported by these herbs, and by linden especially. So, and even the consistency of the infusion, you might notice it takes longer to strain because it's a lot thicker in nature. And with the cut and sifted flour, it's going to be even thicker. You get more mucilage from it. If you don't like that texture, you can warm up your infusion and it will kind of thin out the infusion. I personally love it. It just feels so soothing and nourishing. So it is nourishing because it really supports mucous membranes. Well, what are some examples of mucous membranes? Basically, I think of mucous membranes as anything that comes in contact with the outside world, whether it's coming in contact with the outside world, but internally, like if you think of that classic image of a human being essentially like a donut. So we have our external body and then the internal chambers that come in contact with the air that we breathe or the food that we eat. And so I kind of consider that as coming in contact with the outside world. A lot of immune cells are all wrapped around and involved with those mucous membranes because, again, that's where we come in contact with the outside world. So our body now needs to protect us in those places. So if we can really support the mucous membrane tissues, we're also really supporting our first immune defense as well. So mucous membranes would be, our skin, our sinuses, our whole digestive tract going from the mouth all the way out. If you touch the inside of your cheek with your tongue, that is a classic mucous membrane right there. Our lungs, our urinary tract, and our reproductive organs all have mucous membranes as well. Okay, so we've got our infusion. Now, if you really want that demulcent property of the linden, you can actually do a rebrew with the linden. So you could take, instead of really squeezing all of this out, you can, to get more of the mucilage out of it, you can put this in a small sauce pot on your stove and put 2 cups of water in that and bring it up to a boil and then take it off the heat and let it sit for 2 to 4 hours. And it will draw out more of that mucilage, especially once it cools. So those mucilaginous properties, those mucilaginous polysaccharides actually extract better in cold water than they do in a hot water. And you can really feel them better in a cold drink than in a hot drink. So what I personally find, I feel like I get plenty of the mucilage out of it, especially when I squeeze out my plant material. But you could always try to do a rebrew, and that's fine too, especially if you feel like when you touch your plant material after you've strained it, if it's still really slimy, then you could do a rebrew and get more out of it. But so the infusion, we first hit it with the boiling hot water, but by the time we strain it out, it's been cold. And you can even, before straining your infusion at room temperature, you can stick it in the fridge for a couple hours if you want to get like a really nice cold water extraction with your linden, and that's fine too. So so even though it looked like, the jar was half full of linden blossoms, I still got a full jar of infusion because there's just so much air in the blossoms. And that's just really beautiful. It smells like a flower. It's really delicate and sweet. And as I said, my daughter loves it. So not only is it giving us the anti-inflammatory mucilaginous polysaccharides, it also has some other flavonoids in it, including quercetin. So all in all, the reason why the linden is in the major 5-plant nourishing infusion rotation that Susan Weed originally came up with is because it is so inflammation modulating or anti-inflammatory if you have excessive inflammation. And as we know, many, many, many disease states either start with inflammation or cause more inflammation in the body. It's how our body reacts to assaults and disease a lot of times. So any type of inflammation in the body, linden's really beneficial for quelching. Now in Europe, the linden is commonly made as a tea for the cold and flu season and as a child's tea, just to help to kind of calm and soothe children. So you could just drink it as a tea as well. Benefits the immune system, as I was saying, classic cold and flu remedy, especially in France. But anytime my daughter or I get sick, I'm brewing linden infusion to the hilt, and we're always drinking that. It's so soothing on sore throats or inflamed membranes. Really helpful if you have a cough. Again, just very soothing and restoring to the mucous membranes of the respiratory system, and it supports immune health in general and can also help to reduce fevers. So it's just a great cold and flu herb to have on hand. Also really beneficial for the cardiovascular system, both the emotional heart and the physical heart. One of my mentors, Katya Swift, always talks about linden being like a hug in a mug. And I just love that image. And it really does feel that way when you drink linden. It's just like, it just feels so good. It can really uplift emotions of the heart if there's depression or heartache, heartbreak. But then also on the physical level, it can help to prevent arteriosclerosis or any sort of tension within the cardiovascular system. It can kind of help to quell, and then also to keep those blood vessels flexible. There was something it might be John Lust's herb book that talks about linden, maybe if you drink too much of it, being counterproductive for the heart or maybe having negative effects on the heart. But I think that has been, and also in one of the earlier versions of Peterson's Field Guide to Medicinal Plants, that was included in there as well. But in the newer versions, it's actually been taken out. I think that theory has been debunked, and that it's really been realized that linden is just very beneficial for the heart. And I haven't really heard of any really negative aspects to ingesting linden or contraindications. I haven't really heard of any. It's just such a gentle, mild herb. Great for elders, great for children, and everyone in between. Also really beneficial for the nervous system. Again, similar to the oat straw. If you feel anxious or stressed or exhausted, frazzled, frayed, if you just feel overwhelmed, like all of those are really feelings that can be quelled a bit with drinking linden infusion, nourishing herbal infusion. And then also just nerve pain and neuralgia. Linden can really help to reduce that. Again, any sort of pain that's also caused by inflammation. I talked a little bit about the benefits to the respiratory system, but definitely just the integrity of the lungs, the lining of the lungs. If there's any inflammation in the lungs, it's going to help to quell that. Any sort of cough, it can just really help to restore health to the lungs and the respiratory system as a whole. Urinary tract, again, another mucous membrane, so mild benefit there. Digestive system, very similar to, you hear a lot of people working with marshmallow root, and so for digestive health and for heartburn health and preventing and healing from heartburn and any sort of acidic burns in the esophagus. Linden has the same benefit, the same constituents, those same mucilaginous polysaccharides, and can be just as beneficial, if not more, because I think it does have actually more of those polysaccharides from my general experience. Also, just any sort of pain in the digestive system, bloating, indigestion, so in the intestines or in the stomach, any sort of issues throughout, very beneficial. Also, the reproductive system, more like if you have PMS or tension, cramping, inflammation in the uterus, it can just kind of help to ease and quell that. Even hot flashes, because it's so cooling and soothing, it can help to ease that as well. And then skin, anti-inflammatory. If you have red, itchy rashes, eczema, acne, anything like that, both linden internally and externally can be really beneficial. Also, I blew out my knee and I was using linden as, I would drink my linden infusion as the anti-inflammatory, and then I would just take the, basically this fabric that was full of the linden and still moist, and you can just feel that mucilaginous there too on the fabric, and I would just use this as a fomentation, like on the wound or on the knee. It wasn't a wound, it was a bad injury. So also you could put your linden infusion in bath water and just to kind of soothe, or you could use it as a sitz bath where you would sit in it if you have irritated membranes down there. So full spectrum of benefits of the linden, and I hope that if it's really easy to harvest and dry. If you have a linden tree, I just take the linden and just leave it in a basket and it dries really easily. So cheers to linden. I hope you enjoy it. Yum. Red Clover Blossom, Nourishing Herbal Infusion. Again, another one of my favorite. I guess they're all favorites of mine. They're all so good. Red Clover Infusion has so many benefits. There are, I feel, some debate out there about red clover, and so I want to clear some of that up in this conversation, as well as talk about the astounding amount of benefits that it has to offer us. So red clover, we are working with the blossom, very important, not the leaves. And I like to get the whole blossom. And so I don't know if you can see that. Red clover blossom. This is an ounce of red clover blossom. It's a lot. It looks like a lot. And that's why we always want to weigh out our herbs, because if we think that we're going to get any benefit by putting a few flowers in a cup of tea, we're really not going to get the benefits. So if we really want to get the benefits of the red clover, we need it to weigh out an ounce and put it in a quart jar and make a nourishing herbal infusion. It looks like an extreme amount, but really most of it is air. These red clover blossoms are very light and fluffy, especially when they dry. There's a lot of air space in there. So it can be deceiving, which is why we want to weigh it out. So many minerals. So red clover, trifolium pratense, trifolium being 3 leaves. This is the classic red clover that you see growing in your yard or in your neighbor's field or on the side of the road. They have large, light pink to purplish blossoms, not really red. There is a crimson clover, which is very red and more triangular blossoms, but that's not what we're working with. So it's red clover, though it looks more pink or magenta out in the real world. And it's the whole blossom that we're working with. Trifolium pratense is the species. Pratense means pasture dwelling. So this is the three-leaved plant that dwells in pastures. And yes, it's a great fodder crop for animals, and the bees love it too. I have fond memories as a child, taking each flower out of the clump, the flower blossom head. Each one of those little, it looks like a petal, but it's actually a true flower. Each one of those, what looks like a petal. Picking those out and sucking the sweet nectar out of it, pretending to be a bee. Loaded with vitamins. It has carotenes, which yield vitamin A when we process them in our body. It has a full complex of B vitamins, vitamin C, and also vitamin E. For minerals, we have selenium, we have zinc, calcium, magnesium, chromium, manganese, phosphorus, potassium, and then there's a whole host of trace minerals as well that come along for the ride. Now, also, there's allantoin in red clover, which is the classic healing constituent that's in comfrey, which we'll get into when we talk about comfrey. Also, phytosterols, which are known as plant hormones, I guess you could say, or constituents of plants that our body can turn into plant hormones. Phytoestrogen is what we most commonly hear is in red clover, but there's actually no plant estrogen. It's a phytosterol that our body can take, and actually it's the microbes in our body, the bacteria in our gut. If we have a nice healthy flora of bacteria in our gut, that they can take those phytosterols from the red clover and any plant, seed, flower, root, leaf, and then turn it into something that would look like and fit into hormone receptors in our body. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. Phytosterols, isoflavones, which is related, and loaded with antioxidants. And then it has all the amino acids. Now, something else that kind of leads to so one of the debates around red clover is its content of what is called phytoestrogens, and that kind of puts up a lot of red flags for people who are trying to avoid estrogens or who have estrogen dominant cancer, or just this word estrogen has, in modern day medicine, has scary intonations, ironically enough, because it's also what really makes us women is, the 30 different estrogens that we create. And then there's coumarins. And so yes, there is a drug that is a blood thinning drug called Coumadin, which is originally derived from a type of coumarin in a plant. Now there's actually, I think there's like 17 different types of plant coumarins, and they all have different actions on the body. They're not all blood thinning. So I have this book, which I love if you want to get serious about herbs and contraindications and clinical herbalism. This book is a must-have. Botanical Safety Handbook. It's put out by the American Herbal Products Association, and it has an expert advisory council including Roy Upton, David Winston, Aviva Joel Rahm, Tiarona Lowdog, and many others. And it's edited by Zoe Gardner and Michael McGuffin. This is a very thick book. So, and we go to the Trifolium praetens. And safety class 1, which is very safe. Interaction class A, which is no interactions, and contraindications none known. That's just the general summary. But then I love this part that talks about the anticoagulant coumarins. So red clover is commonly cited as a potential anticoagulant due to the presence of coumarins and confusion between coumarins and the anticoagulant drug Coumadin, sometimes referred to as coumarin. An anticoagulant is basically blood thinning, so we don't want our blood to be too thin, because if we cut ourselves, it's not going to coagulate, or if we bruise, it doesn't have the ability to stop, to thicken and stop bleeding, and so you could bleed out. So, that's a concern. However, a screening of red clover for 17 naturally occurring coumarins identified 5 coumarin compounds in red clover, 1 with anticoagulant activity, 1 with procoagulant activity, and 3 with no activity reported. No changes in bleeding or blood clotting were observed in women after 30 days of red clover supplementation, and that was a scientific study that is referenced here. So that's very interesting. I find that very interesting, and also I love this cue into the fact that herbs are so complex, right? There's not just one coumarin, there's 17, and this one plant potentially, depending on where and when it was harvested and how it was dried, and maybe different plants have different amounts, obviously, of these, but in general, the red clover has 5 of these coumarins, and 3 of them don't even matter, have no activity. One's procoagulant and one's anticoagulant, and this is the complexity that offers modulation, right? So our body can take what it needs and not use what it doesn't need, and that's why often we can't say like one herb has one effect in one direction, because there's such a complex of chemistry that depending on what we need, our body can pick and choose, and then it's going to have a different effect on different people, and maybe even a different effect on us at a different time. But just trusting in the inherent wisdom of nature, the complexity, the variation that is way beyond, I think, our comprehension, but just knowing that we are a part of it and just trusting that to some degree, within reason, we can really start to see that herbs are a lot more modulating versus drugs being very one direction. Like the Coumadin drug is going to have one specific action, and that's it. The red clover is going to have multiple different actions depending on what you need, and overall is going to be very modulating. So, and then also in that book, it talks about the isoflavones, which are can be turned into quote-unquote phytoestrogens and can bind with different estrogen receptor sites. And they were talking about, in one study, it seemed like the red clover isoflavones were binding more with the receptor sites involved with the brain and bones than breast and uterine. And that also that there is no concern about the effects on the endometrium growth or bleeding or any of that based on red clover ingestion, which I think has been a concern in the past, but has been studied and is fine. So overall, I'm not going to be taking like concentrated extracts of red clover in capsule form. I'm going to be drinking Nourishing Herbal Infusion of red clover blossom once or maybe twice a week, and knowing that I'm getting all of these benefits. And a lot of the benefits, because it's in a legume family, it's in the same family as beans, and we know beans are really beneficial for women's hormones. And so we get all of those benefits, but without the hard to digest beans, right? We're not getting that seed coat in the beans that causes gas and bloating and digestive upset. So if you've been told that you need to have more beans in your life for heart health, bone health, hormone health, but you don't like eating beans. I mean, I personally love eating beans, but this is one way to go about it without having to eat beans, but still getting all of the benefit. So what benefits does red clover have to offer us as well? Well, it's basically a nourishing tonic for our blood, for our bones, for our skin, for our lymph, for our lungs, our stomach, our intestines, our endocrine glands, and our reproductive organs. So beneficial. It's what's known as an alterative, which in my mind it means it alters our body toward a greater state of health by working with the organs of metabolism and elimination. So by working with our liver, our blood, our lymph, our kidneys, and our overall ability to digest. And a lot of herbs are in that category, but red clover is a really nice one. Okay, so there's our red clover infusion. The infusions, we have like the brunettes, we have the comfrey leaf, which we'll see, and the nettle leaf, which lead like a really dark green. So I call those the brunettes. And then there's the blondes, the oat straw and the linden, and then the red clover is our red-headed gal. And this is just a really delicious infusion. I find it tastes like Earl Grey tea, so it has the tannins of tea, but also the floral, sweet accents that the Earl Grey offers. So really beneficial for the skin, really beneficial for respiratory, especially if you have a really spasming cough. So it's antispasmodic, can kind of relieve that coughing, the unproductive spasming cough. Really beneficial for enhancing fertility in both men and women. Nervous system, very calming for the nervous system, really supporting the immune system and the lymph. Because of all the minerals, really helps with bone health, and obviously also the isoflavones, if it's binding with the receptor sites that are helpful for bone health as we go into menopause and as our estrogen reduces. This is one way and affects our bone health. This is one way that we can, and our brain health, red clover can help counteract that. Also, just for menopause in general, really helpful in easing that transformation. What else? We have okay, this is an interesting one. It's a discudient. So it helps to break up cysts and help them move on. People will apply like a topical red clover infused oil, but also as a nourishing infusion. So breast cysts, or even sebaceous cysts, like that are just under the skin. And then a really, really great herb in cancer therapies. So it actually has been shown to inhibit tumor growth. It helps to clear waste through the lymph. It also is known as an anti-angiogenic, which means it can help stop the tumors from growing their own blood vessels, so that it can slow the growth or inhibit the growth of tumors, because if the tumors are creating their own blood vessels for food, then this can help to slow that down or inhibit it. And then also specifically worked with for breast cancer, prostate cancer, and lymph cancer. So beneficial, full body health, but also in cancer therapy, and a lot of the concerns out there as far as phytoestrogens and it being estrogenic. Well, those phytoestrogens, quote unquote, actually bind with the receptor site, but it's a loose bind. So that it blocks the more harsher, more dangerous estrogens, like the xenoestrogens that come from our environment, and our own estradiol or estradiol, which is the more dangerous estrogen that we only produce during our childbearing years. Once we enter menopause, we no longer produce it. We still produce all of our other estrogens, all 29 of them. And it's just that 1/30th, the estradiol, that can really cause problems. And the phytoestrogens, the plant constituents that our body can transform into chemicals that then can block those more harsher estrogens. And so that's how that helps. But again, it's a loose bind, so it offers more of a modulating effect again, where if we don't have enough estrogen effects in our body, it can bind with the receptors and give us more beneficial effects. But if we have too much estrogen, or we want to block the more dangerous estrogens, it can do that as well. So very modulating in nature. So hey, cheers to red clover. Woohoo! Go out and get some. Comfrey Nourishing Herbal Infusion. Comfrey is an awesome, wonderful plant in so many ways. It's also really interesting because there's so much debate and information out there about it. Debate among herbalists as to whether, what the best way is to ingest it. Should we ingest it? Should we not ingest it? So it's a plant that has fascinated me, and I've done a lot of research on. I invite you to, if you want to dive deeper than just what this video will offer, episode 31 of the Healthy Herb podcast is all about comfrey. And then also there's the Comfrey Conference, which was put on in 2022, the early spring of 2022, and it's an amazing compilation of different herbalists and everyday common folk, and just a huge amount of perspective and the way that different people have worked with this plant, all compiled into one conference, which is still available for sale. Just Google Comfrey Conference, and I had about, I think, an hour and a half class that I did in that conference all about comfrey. There's also a great book. It's an old book. It's written by Lawrence D. Hills, who really headed up a lot of the hybridization around comfrey in the UK, in Britain. And his book is called Comfrey Past, Present, Future. And I think it was written maybe in the 70s or the 80s. I can't quite remember, but it is full of information and perspective as well. So today I am going to just do an overview of comfrey and why I feel safe ingesting it in the form of a nourishing herbal infusion. I definitely invite you to do your own research and make your own decisions as to what you're comfortable with. But I have found it to be a really wonderful plant to work with as a nourishing herbal infusion, and I know that I am not alone on that there are lots of people who work with comfrey both internally and externally regularly. So this is my perspective and what I've learned from my research, and again, you can dive deeper at those resources that I listed earlier. So comfrey, interesting, Symphytum officinale, or a variety of other species and cultivars, all with the genus Symphytum. So the word comfrey comes from a Greek word confere, the same root that conference is made of, which means to come together. And Symphytum, from the Latin sympho, like symphony, which also means to come together, join together, harmonize. And so really, comfrey traditionally is known to bring tissue together, to heal injuries to the skin, the bones, the connective tissue in general. It was also known as knit bone, because it was thought to like knit the bones back together after them being broken. So there's a lot of nutrition within comfrey, and for the Nourishing Infusion, we work with comfrey leaf. And of course, because all of the infusions are only made with dried plant material. So I'm speaking specifically of dried comfrey leaf throughout this talk. But the dried comfrey leaf is loaded in protein, minerals, and minerals include manganese, iron, calcium, phosphorus, nitrogen, potassium, iodine, chromium, cobalt, and I'm sure many more. And then vitamins, carotenes, the B complex, including B12, and vitamin C. There's also a lot of mucilage in the comfrey, mucopolysaccharides, which are really healing to mucous membranes in the body. And then there's also a constituent called allantoin, or allantoin, which is really known as the healthy cell proliferant attribute or constituent within the comfrey. So that is a constituent of plants, and I believe also I want to say cow urine, ironically enough, but is harvested and added to beauty care products to help healthy skin and whatnot. And then there is also the pyrrolizidine alkaloids within comfrey, which is what a lot of the debate and fear around comfrey is based on. So the pyrrolizidine alkaloids are poisonous constituents. All alkaloids have a poisonous tendency. Some are medicinal and some are not. And so I think there's a wide range of PAs, that's what they're called for short, pyrrolizidine alkaloids, PAs. And comfrey has a handful of them, or a variety of them. Other herbs have other different, so there are some that are more hazardous and some that are less hazardous. Comfrey has a little bit of both in them. And the pyrrolizidine alkaloids, our body metabolizes them, or our liver metabolizes them. And the metabolite, the constituent that it turns one or two of the specific pyrrolizidine alkaloids into, causes problems, is known to cause veno-occlusive liver disease, which means it can block the vein that leaves the liver, maybe the main vein that leaves the liver, and can block it. So then there's a buildup of blood, and the liver is a flow-through organ. All of our blood, from my understanding, flows through our liver every hour. So we don't want any blockages to happen there. That can be really dangerous for the health of the liver. And so that's the concern with the comfrey. Now, there are some reasons around that I feel personally safe from my research and from what I've heard of other people working with comfrey leaf, dried comfrey leaf, and that is that the PAs can easily be denatured when the plant is dried. So there's a lot more PAs in fresh comfrey leaf than there is in dried comfrey leaf. There's also a whole lot more concentration of PAs in the comfrey root than there are in the aerial parts. And also then in the aerial parts, there's a lot more PA concentration in the fresh young spring greens and the early leaf buds. And then as the leaves grow and the plant grows into the full stalk, there's less concentration of PAs. So when we harvest the comfrey, we're harvesting it when it's in bloom. So we get the stalk and the leaves and the flowers. for the infusions. The other thing with PAs is a lot of the scientific studies that are done with PAs are where they actually extract the PAs and turn them into a drug and then inject them into mice and see what kind of horrible results come of that, which horrible results do come of that. And that's where we hear more about liver cancer, is if, so we're not going to be injecting ourselves with PAs. And we're going to be working. And so then also the other thing about PAs and alkaloids in general is they extract a lot more readily and concentrate in alcohol. Alcohol is the solvent that we use to really extract the more poisonous parts of the plant, which can often be the more medicinal acting parts of the plant. Alcohol doesn't necessarily extract proteins and vitamins and minerals very well. That's what water does, and that's why we're making the water, but the PAs don't extract very well into water, from my understanding as well. So we are using dried leaf in a water-based extract or water-based infusion, and so in that way, and we're maybe consuming 1 quart a week at most, and at that rate of comfrey ingestion seems to be very safe. So one thing that I really harp on in other classes that I've taught about comfrey is that comfrey teaches us right relationship, how to be in right relationship with a plant. How do we get to know the plant and all of its complexity, and then how do we, based on that complexity, how do we work best with the plant so that we can reap the benefits and protect ourselves from any potential hazards. So definitely cooking plants tends to denature a lot of the poisonous constituents within them, especially if we cook them for a long amount of time, which is what we're doing with the infusion. So that being aside, there's a lot more research that you can do on that, but I will say that most of the history, and it was mostly really in the 80s that people were having negative health reactions to ingestion of comfrey. A lot of it comes from ingesting root capsules of the root. So that's probably the most hazardous way to ingest the comfrey. Another man ran into problems when he was eating like steamed fresh comfrey leaf. So that's why we definitely want to make sure we dry it. We're not going to be putting comfrey leaf in our smoothies, fresh comfrey leaf in smoothies, right? We're going to be drying it and then cooking it for a long amount of time in water. Okay, so that's as far as I'm going to go with that. There's plenty of research that you can do further if you're interested. But what I really love about comfrey leaf infusion is that it really focuses on, I'd say, like 3 kind of main parts of the body, maybe even 4. So one is these mucopolysaccharides, which really restore the mucous membranes, nourish them, and help reduce inflammation. So mucous membranes would be anything, our whole respiratory tract, our sinuses, our lungs, our whole digestive tract from the inside of our mouth all the way through our reproductive organs and our urinary tract. All mucous membranes, all things that kind of come into contact with the outside world, and our skin for sure. So our internal skins and our external skins. That also, when we support those membranes, we are supporting our immune system, because there's a lot of immune cells and activity that reside in those mucous membranes, because that is where we come in contact with the outside world and therefore potential pathogens or things that may harm us. Then also, comfrey really supports the strength and flexibility of connective tissue. So our ligaments, our tendons, our muscles, our bones, our joints, all our skin and our hair and our nails are all supported by comfrey, especially if there's been any injury to them, or strain or overuse, or if we're expecting there to be injury, like in surgery, or if we're healing from surgery. Very also anti-inflammatory, comfrey is, both with the mucopolysaccharides and with the whole connective tissue connection. And then also, one thing that comfrey is really interestingly beneficial for is, as a side effect, it has specific proteins in it that are specific toward bolstering our short-term memory. And I think that we're going to find with aging more and more that short-term memory becomes an issue. And so the more that we can help to promote our memory functions, the better off we are. And comfrey is great at doing that as well. So all over good health, really bringing flexibility and strength to our body, as well as anti or inflammation modulating or anti-inflammation if we have some really chronic inflammation issues. Ways that I've worked with comfrey, when I had a really bad knee injury, and I actually never got it imaged, so I don't know I did go to physical therapy, but I don't know exactly the extent of it. Pretty sure that I have a torn ACL still to this day, but there were lots of other strains and tears and potentially cracks in bones, and it was just not a good situation. And comfrey was an herb that I relied on heavily. And I feel, back to close to my it's a new normal for sure, but I think that both comfrey internally and externally really helped. And then also, I had an emergency appendectomy probably 9 or 10 years ago, and I worked with comfrey every day. I probably went through a whole pound of comfrey within 2 weeks, and I just ingested it every day to help heal from that surgery. So an ounce of comfrey looks like, hard to see with the glare, but it's about here on the jar. And I find it to be a very milky flavor. It has some tannins, so it has some astringency, but it also has those mucilaginous constituents, which really offer like texture. So it's both astringent, but also a little slimy. So it can be a little weird texture for folks, but I really don't mind it. It's very green tasting. Hot chocolate seems to be a favorite for some people to mix it with. I tend to like it ice cold. Now I will often, you'll notice it strains a little slower because of all those mucilaginous constituents to it. But I find that because I use the straining rag, I can really squeeze out all of that mucilage, which is what we really want for a lot of its healing properties. If you aren't straining this way and you just strain your herb, you can not squeeze it out, and you could do a rebrew. So you could just take the herb unsqueezed, put it in a sauce pot, and then pour 2 cups instead of the 4 cups of water. Bring it up to a quick boil, and then turn it off from the heat and cover it and let it sit for another 2 to 4 hours. And it's just a way to really take out all of those mucilaginous constituents from the comfrey. All right, so I'm going to squeeze this so that I can fit the rest of the comfrey leaf in it. Now, comfrey is also really easy to grow. I would recommend getting the hybrid comfrey, which has various names. Sometimes Russian comfrey is a hybrid, but it's a hybrid if it doesn't go to seed, because once comfrey is growing, you're never going to get rid of it. So you really don't want it to just self-seed readily everywhere, because that can really take over a place. Any little tiny break piece of the root in the ground will make a new plant. And the root is actually pretty brittle, so it does break easily. So if you're like, you planted the comfrey one place and you're like, maybe I want to put it somewhere else. I don't really like this location, because it can get quite large, especially over time. over years. It's a perennial. And then you move it, and then now you have a comfrey in the new place, but within a year, that comfrey is going to grow back in the original place, because guarantee there's still a piece of root somewhere in the ground there, and maybe multiple pieces of root. So now your one comfrey plant has turned into 3 comfrey plants plus wherever you moved it to. Now, for permaculturists, they really like that aspect of comfrey. They often will plant rings around the orchard trees. And because comfrey is so nutrient rich, they'll just cut the leaves of the comfrey and lay it as a mulch around the orchard trees so that no plants can grow up through, but all of those minerals are then put back into the soil. I find that my deer in my yard love to eat comfrey. So if, sometimes you might need to put a fence around it if you live in a place where the deer are in large population. Okay, so I like to just squeeze all I can. And if the plant material still feels like it has a lot of slime to it, then I might do a rebrew. But I usually just compost the leaves and carry on. Also, if you have a topical injury or some sort of skin condition, or an injury like my knee injury, what I would do is I would take this, I wouldn't squeeze it all the way out, and I would just take this fabric and I would put it in the freezer, maybe in a bag, in a plastic bag, and I would freeze it. And then when I needed to apply a cold compress, I would apply this as a fomentation where the herb is inside and the fabric is soaked with the infusion. And I would just apply that, and it felt really good. You could also put the comfrey in a bath or in even a sitz bath, like especially if after giving birth, any tears in the perineum or any sort of anal fissures, which are extremely painful. Comfrey sitz bath could be helpful. And I can actually feel those mucilages on my hands, and they feel really nice, very soothing. So comfrey, again, I just 1 quart a week, and I will say that I personally felt safe ingesting comfrey while I was pregnant. That was my personal preference. Everyone can make their own preference, but at 38 years old, giving birth for the first time, I didn't have any tears and I didn't have any stretch marks. And so I really felt like the comfrey and all of the nourishing infusions really helped to keep my tissues flexible as well as strong, which made for a really wonderful natural home birth at a ripe old age of 38. So I hope that you look into comfrey and give it a try. Schizandra berries are originally from China, Chinese medicine, and are a classic adaptogen herb. Adaptogens really fall into this category of being herbs that are non-toxic, tend to be normalizing or modulating or help to bring us closer to a state of homeostasis in our health, and do not have a specific direction of action. So they are just tend to be full body support. They also tend to help the body be more resilient and adapt better in stressful situations, which obviously we have plenty of those in today's day and age. So Schizandra chinensis is the botanical name, and it's known as the 5-flavored fruit or berry. It grows on a vine, and it's in Ayurveda it's said to have all 5 flavors. So it's also a Ayurvedic herb, Indian herb as well. So let's see if I can think of all 5 flavors. We have sweet, sour, bitter, sweet, sour, bitter, pungent, and spicy? Or is that pungent? It's like umami is one of those 5. Somewhere in that range. All the flavors, and as you eat the berries, you can really like taste them. Even if it's a dried berry, you can kind of go through the flavor profile as you just kind of nibble on one fruit. So that's what you get. That's what we're working with, is the berries. And this here, that's an ounce of berries. So it's, you know, this again is why we weigh it out. Berries are a lot heavier and denser than the flowers and the leaves. Flowers are the lightest, of course. So I buy my Schizandra berries by the pound. And Schizandra, again, it's an adaptogen herb. Adaptogens work, most of them work great as nourishing herbal infusions, unless if they have a strong scent to them, a lot of volatile oils, then they're just better as tea. But the Schizandra berry, you can do a tea with them. You can do a decoction. You can do a tincture, an elixir, oxymel, whatever, however you want to get the berries in to your system is great. I tend to like to make a nourishing herbal infusion with them. It is a pretty strong flavored drink, which you could always dilute. It's also fun to put the infusion in ice cube trays and then use the ice cubes in other drinks, or even in just like bubbly water to give it a flavor as they melt. So I definitely suggest getting Schizandra berries and then even just, you know, nibbling on them occasionally, or some people will infuse them in honey and then take the scoop of honey and berries and, you know, make a tea with those. Because they're a berry, the decoction method works well too, where you can simmer it for about 20 to 40 minutes to really access all the goodness in the berries. But you can also do a nourishing herbal infusion, which is what I have here. So this is the nourishing herbal infusion of the Schizandra berries. It's not super dark. The berries are all rehydrated in there. If you don't have time in the morning and you just want to take your infusion to go, you don't really have to strain it out. You can just kind of strain as you drink through your teeth, because it's just, you know, solid berries. But you can strain it too. So I used to, back in my younger party years, my party alter ego was Schizandra, was her name. Because I just love Schizandra so much, and I think that it's kind of like a wild child of herbs to some degree. But it offers us so much benefit as well, other than it just being an adaptogen and helping to like bring health, overall health, and help us be more adaptive in stressful situations. It's also full of antioxidants, which we can see as, you know, all kind of bright colored fruits are and berries are. It's anti-inflammatory or inflammation modulating, depending on what you need. It's an immune tonic, so it can strengthen the immune system over time and make it just healthier and more effective. This it just even just the smell is just like really invigorating, and it's like you can almost smell the sweet and the sour and the bitter and the spicy all in one. It's also astringent, so lots of herbs are astringent, which basically means they tighten mucous membranes and just tissues in general. They kind of pull things together, and kind of they can be drying in some ways. They can also kind of give the cells some exercise, is kind of how it's been described to me as well, where it's like tones the cellular structure by helping them to kind of, I don't know, do this motion. Classic astringent feeling is like a banana peel in the mouth. Like a green banana peel is like, that's like what astringency is, that like puckering, drying, like. Okay, also a really nice benefit of Schizandra specifically is that it is what's known as a hepatoprotective, or a lung support, I mean not lung, liver support too. So it's, if there's any sort of liver problems or weakness or condition, or if the liver needs to be strengthened more, or if you just feel like the liver is being bombarded with things that are hard for it to deal with, then Schizandra is a really nice herb to incorporate into your infusion routine. Which also means that it's going to be helpful for hormonal health, because our liver is so in charge of managing our hormones and recycling them and determining which stays and which goes and what we're done with and what we need. So anytime we're having what we feel like are hormonal issues, supporting the liver is always going to be important. Also, the nervous system, it's a nervine or a nervine. So it just really helps to support the health of both the nerves, but also if you are chronically stressed or have a lot of anxiety or just feel edgy and not very grounded, then Schizandra can really help kind of pull you in and ground you out. Also really beneficial for the lungs. It's an expectorant and also is known as to be anti-asthmatic. So if you have asthma or lung problems, if you get asthma from being stressed, then this is going to be a really helpful herb for you as well. And then it also supports the kidneys, and really is known to help build like deep energy. So just your energy reserves, if you just feel exhausted or tired or worn out, overwhelmed, like you just can't do anymore kind of feeling, or just drained, then the Schizandra can be really helpful. Or if you're a marathon runner or a really avid athlete, or even probably a muscle builder, then Schizandra could be really helpful as well, because a lot of the adaptogens originally were being studied in Russia as herbs that would kind of, help build endurance and, I don't know, I think make good Olympic athletes and military folk, unfortunately, but I think that's what they were kind of looking for, and maybe good astronauts as well. So I think that herbs that are traditionally known to be adaptogens, that the Russians started studying based on Chinese and Ayurvedic traditional use of herbs, then they're going to be helpful for endurance, really. So also cardiovascular health, supporting the heart and the vessels, and a digestive tonic, which we see a lot with astringents. But again, it's a full rounded, because it has all of the flavors. It's very energetically balanced and neutral. And just the all around really nice adaptogen that is really full in flavor and a fun beverage. And I hope that you can enjoy it as a nourishing herbal infusion every once in a while. Cheers. Ooh, that's good. Astragalus membranaceus. Oh, what an herb. Seriously, this herb is amazing. And I was just refreshing and going through my notes And I was like, you know what, I need to bring a paper with me because there's just so much benefit that this plant can bring to us. It really is impressive. So it's a plant that's in the legume family. It's the root that we work with, and it's really beneficial for all ages and all health states. I mean, it really, especially debilitated health states, it's a real restorative. It's an herb that just builds and strengthens and supports health, but in a really gentle way. And it actually tastes really good. It's very sweet, and it's an adaptogen, so it's an herb that can be taken in a variety of ways. Nourishing infusion, I find, is the easiest way, but you can also decoct it since it's a root. People work with the tincture of it, and that's fine too. And then also just including it in food, like you can buy, big tongue depressor like sizes. Well, those are harder to find more and more these days, I find. But, bigger chunks of the root, slices of the root that you can put in your rice pot or your bone broth pot, or even in soup. You just want to pull it out at the end because it is quite woody, and not necessarily the root itself isn't edible, but you can infuse it into your food or your beverages. So I like to make a nourishing herbal infusion with it. This is what 1 ounce, this is a cut and sifted root. This is what 1 ounce looks like. It's a pretty small amount compared to our leaves and flowers for sure. It, depending on, I find that there's a lot of variation in astragalus root from batch to batch, distributor to distributor. The different style of cut and sift that some roots have. Some it looks more shaved and stringy, others are chunkier. I've even gotten some that looked like they were the tongue depressor size root, but it was actually just compressed, kind of shaved root. So, but it's all good. If you can find North American grown astragalus root, that's even better. A lot of the astragalus root still comes from China, and the farming practices there are somewhat questionable. But that we just work with what we have, really. So non-toxic food, like infuse it into food. You can also get astragalus powder, and I like to add that to my smoothies, as well as I like to add it to the snack nuggets or snack balls where you make nut butters and powdered herbs and dried fruit, or granola bars, granola. It's just very mild in flavor, pretty sweet, and really easy to add into any type of food. Lots and lots of benefit. So it's, I think it's best known as an immune supportive herb. Just really building the immune system in a variety of ways, which we'll get into. But also it's generally antioxidant. It's a wonderful liver protector herb, very restorative. It is an adaptogen, so like the schizandra berry, it really is non-toxic, non-specific in action, and very modulating, and helps to bring the body closer to homeostasis, really helps us deal with stress and makes us more resilient and flexible in stressful situations, whether it's physically stressful or emotionally stressful. So also supportive of the spleen, and which ties in with its immune system support. And it's actually also antibacterial and antiviral. So it's anti-infective against the staph infections, as well as salmonella and other infections as well. It is also really known to fight the first onset of an infection of Lyme specifically. So if you live in an area where there's a lot of ticks or a lot of Lyme disease, or the co-infections, then astragalus is really nice to incorporate on a regular basis during the season that the ticks are out, or seasons, I should say. I think the only season they're not out is the dead of winter, is what I've come to realize. And then sometimes the astragalus can be beneficial for people who are dealing with chronic Lyme, but sometimes it is not helpful and maybe even is counterproductive for people dealing with chronic Lyme. But that's really person specific and how your own immune system is dealing with the chronic situation. It's a tonic herb. So during this course, I've been kind of talking about the different categories of herbs and how I feel like adaptogen and tonic are kind of this amorphous type categories of herbs that kind of can often coincide and can be nourishing or can end up to be tonic herbs anyway. Might be leaning more toward sedative and stimulating herbs, but really they're just more supportive. So they're kind of in between the nourishment and the stimulating and sedating. Tonic herbs, I think of a tonic as an herb that just strengthens and supports a specific organ system. And it's almost like jogging or muscle or weightlifting is a tonic for your muscles. So then an astragalus would be a tonic for your immune system. And doing it just one time is not going to do much for you, but doing it in a pattern over a long period of time is really going to help you. So where if you are trying to build your muscles, you can't just weight lift once and expect anything to happen. But if you weight lift once or twice a week for months on end, then you're really going to see some benefit, and the benefit accumulates and builds. And that's kind of similar with the tonic herbs, in that you can't just do it once and expect anything to happen. You don't want to do it every day all the time, because that might wear out whatever you're trying to strengthen. But in some sort of a repetitive pattern is how they work best. So tonic, so astragalus just happens to be a tonic herb for a lot of different organs or organ systems. One is the heart tonic, it's a lung tonic, it's a digestive tonic, it's known as a kidney tonic, a liver tonic, a spleen tonic, an immune system tonic. It just really offers a lot of support of a lot of different systems of the body. It also is diuretic, which ties in with its effects on the kidney, and it is antiperspirant, which is random, but if you have excessive perspiration, it might be one to try out. And it's a rejuvenative. So if you are coming out of some sort of illness or debilitated state, it can be really, really beneficial. I'm going to take a sip of it because I'm feeling a little rough. I've been talking a lot today. And it feels so nourishing. It is so sweet. You can taste the sugars. It's slightly rooty. It has like a little bit of an earthy flavor undertone, but it's really enjoyable. And kids love it. I love to put it in smoothies too, as like the juice of a smoothie. It works really well. Ways that it supports our immune system. It increases macrophage activity, which is a type of immune cell. It also increases the stem cells in the bone marrow and lymph tissue. And not only does it increase them, but it also triggers their maturation into immune cells. So it builds the number of immune cells that we have that are able to fight. I said it was an immune tonic, so overall strengthener, tonifier of the system or systems as a whole. I mean, our herbalists, we talk about the immune system, but really it's like so much more than just one system, right? It's not, you can't like put your finger on the immune system. There's so many nuts and bolts and pieces. And astragalus really affects a lot of those nuts and bolts and pieces. So it also increases phagocytosis, which I think is like the eating, where the immune cells come along and eat things that our body doesn't really need, or it might be infectious or pathogenic. It increases spleen activity and immune cell release from the spleen. It helps healthy cells to resist viral invasion. So during the cold and flu season, it's just a nice herb to always be incorporating and to have on hand, especially for kids who are in school, and for parents who are exposed to whatever their kids pick up. But kids tend to get a lot more stuff because hopefully we've already gotten a lot of what, and they're still building up their immune responses. Also increases healthy cell regeneration and is really beneficial for people who have allergies or are in the flux of cold and flu season. Even if you have a cold or a flu, it can be helpful. People that are dealing with cancer and even people that are dealing with HIV. Now there is this kind of what's generally talked about, I feel like, astragalus in modern American herbalism is it's a lot of times it's said that you don't want to take astragalus when you're in the midst of a cold or a flu because based on Chinese theory, it creates an energetic shield around the body that will hold the virus or bacteria in the body and not allow it to be released and be gotten rid of. And so there's this big talk, I feel like, in modern day herbalism, a lot of herbalists and well-known herbalists talk about it this way, that you don't want to, and almost like, no, you definitely never want to have astragalus during a cold or a flu. And this confused me because also a lot of the research that I have done says, oh, well, it's actually quite antiviral and antibacterial, and it does enhance your functioning of the immune system. And I was like, well, that doesn't really make that much sense to me. And an energetic shield, I don't know, maybe I'm just too practical or scientific. Also, I think a lot gets lost in translation. Like I haven't talked specifically to a Chinese doctor or herbalist about it. I usually just hear it from American herbalists who have heard it from other American herbalists who maybe at one point someone heard it from a Chinese herbalist. And so I would want to dig a little deeper into that. I haven't really been able to unearth it too much, but I know that a lot gets lost in translation between Chinese medicine and modern day American herbalism, just with how the body is viewed and described and talked about. It's very, very different paradigms. So I think it's kind of hard, and I think a lot of does get lost in translation. So I personally am not afraid to take astragalus if I am actually fighting a cold or a flu. But that's me personally, and I know other herbalists have different takes on that. But I would say, there might be more anti-infectious herbs out there that are stronger than astragalus, and where astragalus you can kind of take all the time without any problems. But I think they also, it's not like you also have to worry about it in autoimmune conditions either. That's totally fine and can be really helpful, especially if the autoimmune condition is debilitating. Now it's also so beneficial in cancer therapy and in conjunction with traditional or conventional cancer therapies. And I had to take some notes because there's so many different ways that it helps with that. So one way is that it enhances the natural killer cell activity, which fight cancer and viral infected cells via apoptosis. So basically sends a message, a self-destruct message to a cell that is mutated or is infected with viral genetics, where the virus is using it to replicate its genetics and spread itself. So apoptosis is kind of like the self-destruct button, or I just love saying that word, apoptosis. So it enhances that ability. It's also known to reduce tumor cells and inhibit tumor growth, which I think is interesting because that's similar to the red clover that we talked about, and they're both in the legume family. the pea and bean family, which I don't know if that has any relationship to that at all, but I just find that interesting. It's also, there was a study done that it was shown to prevent metastasis, which is basically the cancer spreading from one where it originally started to other parts of the body. It was able to prevent that in 80% of mice in this one study that was done. So that would be interesting to look further into if you are dancing with cancer. It also has been shown to restore immune function to cancer patients whose immune function has been wiped out, whether it's been from chemotherapy or other therapies or from the cancer itself. Also has been shown to protect the liver. As we know, it's a liver tonic and a liver restorative and protective, similar to the Schizandra, which is the other adaptogen that we have talked about, from a variety of medications that challenge the liver, including chemotherapy and radiation. And I have heard that in China, that it's very important that people work with adaptogens while they're working with cancer therapy, and that it's really seen as a total disservice to not include adaptogens along with when we're doing chemotherapy and radiation or radiation. The astragalus specifically is also shown to reduce side effects from chemo and radiation, and also to enhance the beneficial effects of the chemotherapy and radiation. So not only does it help protect the body from the negative aspects of it, but it also does help the functioning of the chemotherapy and radiation. So for me, I know that if or when I have to deal with chemotherapy or radiation, either for myself or loved ones, the astragalus, as well as mushrooms and other herbs, all nourishing herbal infusions really, but definitely astragalus and mushrooms are going to be on the top of my list. And one thing that the astragalus and the mushrooms both have in similarity, as well as seaweed and a lot of other plants, are these polysaccharides. And it's not the mucilaginous polysaccharides like in the linden and the comfrey, but just polysaccharides in general, which are these long chain sugars, which can really kind of awaken and enliven and support immune function. And the way that I was taught that it can do this is really interesting, in that pathogens tend to, like bacteria, carry their backpack with them that's full of their food so that they can be stronger. You know, they don't just travel without a food supply, they actually carry polysaccharides with them as like a little backpack storage food supply. And different bacteria can be identified by the type of polysaccharide that they carry with them. We can identify them that way. But our immune system and our immune cells actually also identify pathogenic bacteria by these polysaccharides as well. So they're actually kind of like a little trigger for the immune system, and to kind of wake up and pay attention. So the way I was taught is that when we ingest herbs that are high in polysaccharides, like the astragalus, which you can taste, it just even tastes really sweet, then those are going to be cycling through our blood and our system, and our immune cells are going to kind of be like, oh, whoa, there's polysaccharides around, let's hep, like, let's wake up, let's make the rounds, let's see what this is all about, what are these from, or is this something we have to worry about? And so they'll notice them, they'll be like, oh, no, there's nothing attached to them, it's fine, whatever. But while I'm awake and making the rounds, I might as well check around for any sort of cancer or other pathogens that might be around. So for an immune system that might be weak or needs a little enticing, ingesting things with polysaccharides can be really helpful, but not too stimulating or overly stimulating. Because again, this is not a stimulant herb, it's not an immune stimulant, it's an immune tonic and supporter. And then I also had a list of a few other things that astragalus, imagine that, there's even more that astragalus can do. So not only does it enhance energy and vitality, but so it's really beneficial for people who are chronic fatigue syndrome or dealing with fibromyalgia. It can really increase appetite. So again, that's really helpful for people going through chemotherapy or general debilitated states, people who are at the end of their life, and it just can be really helpful nourishment and food and enhancement. It can cool a fever, which is another reason why I'm like, oh, well, maybe it would be, I don't see what's the problem necessarily in taking it if that's what you have available to you and you have a cold or a flu. Also increases cardiac blood flow. It can strengthen tendons, bones, and muscles. And it increases athletic performance and endurance, which again is a classic adaptogen herb trait or quality. It's kind of what the scientists, when they were originally looking for herbs that they would consider to be adaptogenic, they were looking for herbs that specifically enhanced endurance and athletic performance. And it increases cardiac function, especially after or during, after an experience of congestive heart failure. It can actually really help to support the heart after that and help it to recover. And then also improve kidney function, even in chronic kidney disease. So really, I mean, how can you go wrong with astragalus? I just don't know. I don't think you can. Plus it tastes good on top of all of that. So get yourself some astragalus root and incorporate it into your nourishing self-care ritual. Cheers. And it's truly chuggable. All right, rose hips are also a super nutrient-dense wild food that makes a wonderful nourishing herbal infusion. And they're relatively inexpensive. They're also pretty easy to harvest and dry, although the one issue with the rose hips is inside the hip itself, which is the fruit from the rose, and any wild rose hip should work. There's a variety of sizes, but inside the hip are seeds that all are surrounded by these little hairs, and the hairs can be very itchy and irritating to the throat if you were to drink them. So whatever you do, you just want to make sure that you either keep your hip totally intact so that the hairs stay inside the hip, which you can do with the smaller rose hips. If you get the bigger rose hips, drying them like the beach rose, the Rosa rugosa, that just gets a little bit more intense as far as cutting them in half, scooping out the seeds and all the hairs and drying them that way. But if you are straining your infusion through a cloth that has a pretty tight weave to it, tighter than cheesecloth, then it might be okay anyway, because you'll probably be capturing the hairs. But I personally, just for ease, I buy my rose hips dried, and maybe with the fresh rose hips that I gather, I'll make other fun things like oxymel or vinegar infused, maybe even a tincture or an elixir for fun. But I find that to get a lot of the rose hips into daily lifestyle, it's nice to incorporate Nourishing Herbal Infusion. I also buy rose hip powder that I'll add to smoothies or add to granola or treats that I make. So that's about an ounce of the rose hips that I purchased. It's a lot smaller again than flowers and leaves because it's a lot denser and heavier. So that's why we weigh our herbs every time, because it's always different. And rose hips are just basically a really nutrient-dense wild food. They were actually in World War II in England, it was considered a supplement food, and they were, paying people to wild harvest rose hips and sell them to the government that would then distribute them, from my understanding, as a a power food when times were very tight as far as food went. So supposedly rose hips are like the best source of vitamin C per weight. They offer the most vitamin C complex than any other source. So that's great. Also full of bioflavonoids, which help our body to actually make use of the vitamin C. Also antioxidants, tannins, there's some pectin in there, carotenes, which our body can convert to vitamin A, fruit acids, a whole complex of B vitamins, vitamin E, selenium, chromium, phosphorus. There's protein in them. There's sodium, citric acid, malic acid. There's saponins and also some mucilage. So general, like easing debilitated states or extreme exhaustion, malnutrition, rose hips can be really beneficial. They can decrease inflammation, excessive inflammation in the body, and also help to either prevent or recover from oxidative or excessive oxidative damage, with those antioxidant properties. They really are tonics to a lot of our body systems, so including the cardiovascular system. They are a tonic to the heart, the blood, and they can increase the health of our circulation and also decrease the risk of arteriosclerosis. They are an immune tonic. They help to support the functioning of our immune system, as well as they are antibacterial and antiviral, and they are a nice remedy during the cold and flu season. They can help fight infections, they can help ease coughs, and they also, as far as immune health, they are considered anti-mutagenic, and that's probably due to their antioxidant properties. So help keep cells from mutating in ways that we don't want them to. And let's see, so kidney support, kidney tonic, as well as a mild diuretic. And they also really support the health of our connective tissue. So our skin, really beneficial for our skin. Just think of all those antioxidants and vitamins in there, as well as our joints and anti-inflammatory, especially for arthritis. And then a brain tonic as well. So really supportive to the brain. And my research told me that especially for children who need help with concentration and focus and attention, that the rose hips can be really helpful, as well as helping with stress ease or supporting children who are in stressful situations. So sounds like any kid in school to me. And yeah, that's rose hips in a nutshell. So pretty basic. I just find that the infusion tastes delicious. Another way that people really like to use rose hips is they make a rose hip syrup for cold and flu season, which is basically just a concentrated decoction where you simmer the rose hips for a long time until your water is halved, and so it's really concentrated, and then you add honey to sweeten it. But I find that even just drinking the Nourishing Infusion, that way you can drink a full quart, maybe once a week, or a couple, maybe even once every other week, depending on what you need, or maybe even a cup a day, just like a small amount every day. That works too. You can actually really feel like the mucilage when you're straining this, and also kind of the sticky pectin. Pectin tends to be really helpful if for like diarrhea, for relieving diarrhea, and also just for like binding with maybe poisons or foodborne pathogens that we don't want in our intestines that can really help to just bind and help eliminate. So it could also be helpful for that. I kind of just want to like rub it all over my skin or make a face mask with it. Could be really fun with the leftover rose hips that are fully hydrated, rehydrated. I bet you could even make like a little chutney of some sort with these rehydrated rose hips. They smell really good. They're like, they almost smell like tomato paste to me a little bit, like that sweet and savory scent. And that's almost what they taste like too. They almost have a little bit of a tomato taste to it, even though they're in a different family. But they are in the rose family. It's a very safe family. It has a lot of our fruit trees in it, our apple tree and plum tree and pear tree and almonds and all of that. So give it a try. I hope you enjoy it, and you can always sweeten it or warm it up if you'd like, but add it to smoothies. I know my child enjoys it, and it's great for kids and elders and everyone in between. Cheers. Chickweed. Chickweed is a fun plant to get to know. It's Stellaria media, the medium star flower. It's a wild plant that is a really common weed, especially in the cooler temperatures. So at least here in Maine, it's really popular in the spring and in the fall. It kind of has a second flush. In the height of the summer, it just kind of withers away. It is an annual, so it reproduces seeds every year. So if you want to maintain a healthy patch of chickweed, don't harvest it all, let some go to seed. But it makes a lovely green, wild green food in salads, or pesto is delicious. Chickweed, it really just has a very spinachy, kind of succulent flavor to it. And the infusion flavor also just kind of tastes like spinach, like mild green spinach. I think it's pretty easy to drink. So why do we want to even drink this spinach-like infusion? Well, chickweed is full of nutrition, of course, and protein. So minerals that it contains include phosphorus, calcium, zinc, copper, iron, potassium, chromium, manganese. I don't know if I already said magnesium, but definitely magnesium, silicon, aluminum, cobalt, molybdenum, and then vitamins, carotenes, which we can turn into vitamin A, B vitamin complex, C vitamins, D as well, vitamin, and protein. It's also very cooling and moistening in general, very soothing, again, to the mucous membranes, like a lot of these great nourishing herbs are. An interesting component that chickweed has, the other plants have too, but chickweed is I feel like known for it, is it has a lot of saponins in it. And if you think that saponin sounds kind of like soap, well, you're right. It does have this kind of frothy, soapy nature to it that can actually break up fatty things, like how soap can break up oil and grease in a fry pan. Saponins can break up fats, kind of has this emulsifying action. And so chickweed is really well known for helping to break up, fatty cysts, especially ovarian cysts or even breast cysts. So not only do saponins do that, but saponins help the mucous membrane of the intestines to absorb more nutrients. So if you're nutrient deplete, or if your digestive system is having a hard time absorbing nutrition, then chickweed could be a really nice benefit. So not only does it provide a lot of nutrition, but then it also has the saponins, which help the body to take in the nutrition. It's also because of this saponic action. It is known to help if you are looking to reduce your weight. If you're on a weight loss program, then chickweed infusion could be helpful in a healthy way. And it is also really beneficial for the saponins in general, really help things, blood especially and lymph, flow better. So you get a lot more flow through the liver and the kidneys and the lungs and the lymphatic system. So it's really helpful if you feel like the sense of stagnancy or sluggishness within your body. And so herbs that tend to do this tend to support all of these systems of metabolism, like the liver and digestion and kidneys and metabolism and elimination, I would say, are known as alteratives. So chickweed is known as an alterative herb, and alterative is kind of an interesting term in that for me, what I've learned is that it really helps these herbs that are known as alteratives help in like a broad spectrum way to move the body toward a altered state of health, a better state of health, by supporting a large range of these organ systems of metabolism and elimination. Just keeping things moving and healthy and good to go and nourished. Also, chickweed, because it's this cooling and moistening, it's quite anti-inflammatory if there's excess inflammation, or inflammation modulating. And it's very demulcent and emollient, so externally very soothing to the skin and internally very soothing to the internal skins or the mucous membranes of the body, which would be our whole respiratory system, our sinuses, our lungs, and then our whole digestive system, right from the mouth all the way through, and our urinary tract and our reproductive organs all have mucous membranes to them. So along those lines, chickweed can be really beneficial if your lungs, if you have bronchitis or like chronically inflamed lungs, or pain, burning anywhere in the body, but in the lungs, in the digestive system, on the skin. Eczema could be maybe very helped with chickweed. Any sort of eye inflammation is also really helped with chickweed, even like as a topical compress with the infusion or fomentation with the straining cloth on the eyes. Conjunctivitis too, with the eyes closed, of course. And then swollen lymph glands, or lymph nodes, I should say. So any sort of tonsillitis or any sort of just chronically swollen lymph nodes. I mean, I feel like if our lymph nodes are swollen, it's just a sign that our body is, working on something, working on eliminating an infection, or, our immune system is functioning. But we also want to make sure that we don't get chronically swollen lymph nodes, that we can keep things moving as well. Also, nerve pain, if you have any neuralgia, chickweed can be very soothing to that specifically. Also helping with healthy menses and lactation for women. And also general thyroid health, or even if you have like a thyroid cyst or a swollen thyroid, then this could be a benefit for you as well. So a whole range of things that chickweed can really offer us. And I just feel like it's a wonderful wild food to be able to incorporate into our nourishing infusion routine. So this is an ounce of chickweed, dried, cut and sifted. And this was actually probably one of the lesser expensive herbs to purchase. I don't know if it's just because it hasn't caught on yet to what a wonderful herb it is as an infusion. But I think people can also use a chickweed tincture, or they will do chickweed oil topically to rub on any sort of cysty type of area, like lumpy breasts or whatever. All right, so we're going to strain out this chickweed infusion. This has a good seal on it. Made this last night. There we go. Okay, so again, this is another great mucilaginous herb along with the comfrey and the linden. And so it might strain a little slower than the others. And you could do a rebrew if you wanted, like you would with the comfrey and linden, which you would just, instead of really squeezing out this herb material, you could just plop it back into a sauce pot and pour a couple cups of water on top of it, bring it up to a quick boil, and then let it reduce down to room temperature again. And then strain that and squeezing it to see if there's any leftover mucilage. And that's what's great about these infusions. I mean, yes, we want to drink them, but we can also work with them topically, whether in bath water, as rinse, and then we can even work with the herb material that's left over as a poultice, or that's already in the straining cloth as a fomentation, where you could just like put it right on any sort of inflamed skin or tissue. And chickweed, it's just such a sweet little plant that is, you'll find it, even if you're in the city, you'll find it growing in pots or around the base of trees. It likes kind of shady, cool areas. But it tends to kind of vine along, it's almost doesn't have enough support for its own body to stand up straight, so it just kind of flops along and grows along the ground. But try some chickweed out, see what you think. Cheers. In conclusion, I hope that this class series has really inspired you to start working with nourishing herbs in the Nourishing Herbal Infusion, and to really incorporate them as a daily ritual of self-care and a way that you can really work with herbs on a daily basis and wild plants at the same time, and really work with them to build health instead of to fight disease. We want to nourish and support health and not necessarily focus on a diagnosis and try to eliminate it. Working to nourish our whole bodies and our whole self, and in so doing, the sky's the limit. We'll see what amazing possibilities can breed from that. So I have a quick kind of top 10 takeaways here that I hope that you've gained from this class series. And one is, nourishment is never found in a pill. So if you are currently taking supplements or multivitamins and minerals, I really strongly would suggest that you throw them out, because it's not true nutrition. And it's not complex nutrition, which is what our body really strives and needs, and to really lean on the nourishing herbs instead. And really trust that we are getting a full range of complex minerals and vitamins and protein and a lot of other phytonutrients that a pill could never offer us. Number 2, herbs are not drugs. So they work very differently. And as soon as we start thinking about these, especially these nourishing food-like herbs, as drugs, we kind of miss the whole point. So drugs have a very specific direction of action. They're very concentrated, often a poison that has a medicinal action that, if taken in too large of amount, could cause really serious side effects. Whereas these nourishing herbs, they have a broad reaching action on the body, and they have non-specific action, a lot of them, and you can ingest as much of them as you want, and very rarely will you have a negative side effect. Along those lines, number 3 is herbs are amphoteric in action, or very modulating, tend to be in action. So they can work one way or the other way, and basically helping us to come to more homeostasis. Our body can take what the herbs offer us, the complexity of the herbs, and we can take and use whatever we need from them, and the rest we can eliminate. And we talked about that in the red clover class, where they have these variety of coumarins in them. Some can be anticoagulant, and some are procoagulant of the blood, and therefore that just has like a modulating action. So they can, plants offer variety and tend to be more amorphous in their action. And it can take a bit to paradigm shift into that and to trust it. I totally get that. And it is a huge paradigm shift in working with the nourishing herbs for health and healing. Number 4, the nourishing herbal infusions work really well if we are working on prevention and building health to prevent a variety of health conditions that we don't want, undesirable health conditions. And then also they can be really beneficial if we have chronic health complaints that we are trying to bring our body back toward, or forward, I should say, toward a more homeostasis, or a better health state, one that is more comfortable for us. And especially when dealing with chronic inflammation. Pretty much all of the nourishing herbs have inflammation modulating or anti-inflammatory properties to them. So not only that, but they can also work as adjunct therapy. So if you do have a chronic health condition and you are dependent on drugs and or cancer therapies, these nourishing herbal infusions are so food-like that they are often very safe to work with. So for example, if you can eat kale with your drugs, then you can drink comfrey nourishing herbal infusion, comfrey leaf. If you can eat spinach with your drugs, then you can drink nettle nourishing herbal infusion. If you can drink chamomile tea with your drugs, then you can drink linden nourishing herbal infusion. If you can eat oatmeal with your drugs, then you can drink oatmeal nourishing herbal infusion. And if you can eat beans and legumes with your drugs, then you can drink red clover nourishing herbal infusion. They are all very similar, or have constituents that are less problematic than all the plant foods that I just compared them to. So again, these are foods. These are not drugs. These are not strong herbal medicines, but you don't need strength to have really drastic health effects. Number 5, new habits take time to build. So if we are really aiming to drink 1 quart of nourishing herbal infusion a day for the rest of our lives in an ideal world, it's probably not going to happen overnight. So just give yourself time, let this become a habit that you stick with over time. Makes a great New Year's resolution, or any time of year resolution. Really map out a plan. These are the 5 herbs that I want to work with. Buy a pound of each of those herbs. Get make sure you have a scale. Make sure you have at least 2 canning jars, and put them out on your counter. Put them in front of you so you see them. Don't tuck them away in the pantry or a cabinet where you don't see them. Really, to make it a habit, and tie it in with something that you already do on a daily basis, whether it's brushing your teeth, making a cup of coffee, cleaning up after dinner, something that you're already doing on a daily basis, and then just tie the process of making the infusion with that. If you already carry a water bottle with you throughout the day, don't drink water, drink Nourishing Herbal Infusion, because it has so much more to offer you than just water. Let's see, number 6. It's really important that with plant food that we break down the cellular structure if we're going to get any nutrition from them. So there's 5 main ways that we can do this. Raw plant food is actually really hard on the digestive tract, and we really can't extract the nutrition from it. Our digestive system isn't designed to do that, and actually most animals' digestive systems are not really designed to do that. We would have to eat all day long and not stop if we were going to get the nutrition that we really needed if we were only to eat raw food. So, and that would probably kill our digestive system. It would be so hard to work through all of that fiber. So if we think about babies, that have these really delicate digestive systems, what do? We feed them, once they're ready to eat food, solid plant food, we feed them really, really well cooked, right? Enough so that it can be mushed into a puree. Now, you don't have to eat all of your plant food in puree, but if your plant food is fermented, if your plant food is frozen first before you cook it or eat it or put it in a smoothie, if your plant food is dehydrated first, if your plant food is cooked at a temperature for like an hour, then it's at a higher temperature, like roasted or simmered or cooked in a soup or a crock pot. That's going to really help to break it down. And then if you cover your plant food in oil or some sort of fat, or if you eat your salad or your raw food with an avocado or a solid amount of really healthy oil, because you can actually see the oil break down that cellular structure over time. And so all of those ways, and so with the Nourishing Infusions, we are doubling down. We have both dehydrated our plant material, and we have also heated it for a long time to really extract the nutrition from it. Number 7, working with plants as simples, where we are working with one plant at a time, is really important for us to really engage our relationship, build an intimate relationship with the herbs, and really understand how they're working in our body. Number 8, working with weeds, common plants that grow all around us, even if we're still purchasing them for Nourishing Herbal Infusions. If the supply chains were to totally fall apart, which we have seen actually happen, like if there's a worldwide pandemic or who knows what, natural disasters, then we could still go out and harvest our linden blossoms, harvest our nettle, harvest our chickweed. We have not become reliant on someone to make us our nutrition. We can still go out and find it ourselves. Number 9, whole herbs. Working with whole herbs, really then we are working with the inherent wisdom of nature. We are working with the complexity that each plant has to offer us, with the variety of chemistry that our body needs and has coexisted with as food since we have been humans on this planet. And also the natural variation. So humans, we are very varied, right? From person to person, and throughout the day, throughout the year, from month to month, day to day, even hour to hour, our bodies are always doing something a little bit different. And so if we can provide variation within our nutrition, it just seems to work better. Even though our mind says, no, I need control. I need to know exactly what I'm taking in and exactly how it's going to work. And I need to know what's in each batch of infusion, what the numbers are, and really just let all of that go and just trust in the inherent wisdom of nature, complexity, and variation. And then number 10, working with the herbs, and I think, and what I've tried to get across in this series of classes as well, is we can either go an inch deep and a mile wide with our herbal studies, or we can go a mile deep and an inch wide. And for me, I find that if we are going a mile deep, where we're really getting to know each herb on a one-to-one basis, we don't need to know 200 herbs. We don't need to work with 200 herbs. We can work with 5 herbs on a daily, on a regular, weekly basis. And we can really dive deep with those herbs. And through that, we can learn so much about herbalism, health, nutrition, and how our bodies work, and how our bodies relate to the natural world and to the plant world. So I would love it if you would dive into the world of Nourishing Herbal Infusions and then reach out to me, Brighid Doherty, Solidago Herb School. You can find me on, Solidago Herb School at Gmail if you want to email me. Instagram, my website, all with the Solidago Herb School tag. Check out the Healthy Herb podcast, where we really dive deep into a lot of herbs and topics on herbalism. Check out my book, Nourishing Herbal Infusions. I wish it was a book. When I was writing the book, I was like, I want it to be a book all about Nourishing Herbal Infusions. It does include Nourishing Herbal Infusions, but drinkable, healing herbal infusions. And then really just reach out to me. Let me know how it's going. I would love to hear from you. And I want to thank HerbRally for having me on this frugal nutrition course journey with you all. I am just really honored to be a part and for you to take your time to check out what I have to offer, what information I would love to share. So, thank you so much. Green blessings.